Chapter 2441. Although Ji Tianqing's divine power had a great restraining effect on demonic power, Ji Tianqing's divine power had a great restraining effect. He was the demon's nemesis. However, Yin Yao was more sensitive to demonic energy and demonic aura. Since she had a bad feeling, it was proof that something was wrong with Sky Cloud. Ji Tianqing hurriedly stopped and said with a solemn expression, "All right, I'll use my divine sense to check again." Yin Yao nodded. Silently she unsheathed her twin swords and stood guard at his side. Ji Tianqing released his formless divine sense, which spread out like quicksilver, enveloping the entire city in a careful examination. All of the buildings, streets, and alleys in the city within a radius of 150 kilometers were reflected in his mind. Where the guards were hidden, where the army was stationed, where the traps and ambushes were laid out, it was all clear to him. Even the imperial palace, which was heavily guarded and had the strongest defense, could not block the probing of his divine sense. It didn't take long for him to discover that there were hundreds of demonic generals and tens of thousands of elite guards. In the depths of the palace there was also the aura of a demon saint. He was no stranger to it. It was the great demon saint, Ling Xian. Half an hour later, Ji Tianqing had learned everything about the city. Only then did he withdraw his consciousness. He turned to look at Yun Yao with a puzzled expression. "I've already scanned the city. There's nothing out of the ordinary. Ling Xian is overseeing the city. He has an army of 1,300,000 demonic soldiers under his command, as well as 700,000 demonized civilians. The number of blood gods and generals has reached 300 as well. It's an impregnable stronghold, filled with experts." Yun Yao frowned and asked worriedly, "Did you not detect the aura of the ancestral devil god? Or is there an ambush in the city?" Ji Tianqing shook his head. Yun Yao hesitated. After a moment she spoke in a serious voice. "Tianqing, we're already in Sky Cloud. There's no need to rush. Let's wait outside for a few hours. It won't be too late for us to enter the city at dawn." Ji Tianqing did not care if there was an ambush in the city. The reason he carried out the beheading plan was to force the ancestral fiend god to show himself. If the ancestral devil god was in the city, that would be exactly what he wanted. However, Yin Yao insisted on acting cautiously. He would not act rashly, so he nodded and agreed. "All right, then we'll do as you say. We'll observe for a few hours." Then, Yun Yao put away the glazed fire dragon. She and Ji Tianqing retracted their auras and used the invisibility technique to escape into the darkness. The two of them hid outside the city walls, blending in with the darkness as they watched. Time passed silently as the two of them waited patiently. Sky Cloud was as calm as ever, with nothing out of the ordinary. Unknowingly, 4 hours had passed. Dawn was coming, and the sky was about to brighten. Yin Yao's brows furrowed as she thought to herself. There's been no movement in the city, nothing out of the ordinary. Am I overthinking things? Too nervous? At this moment, a spiritual light suddenly lit up in the night sky behind the two of them. Whoosh! The white light cut through the night sky and flew to Ji Tianqing in an instant, falling into his palm. In this way, his and Yun Yao's location was exposed. If there were experts secretly watching, they would have discovered this situation. Ji Tianqing lowered his head to take a look and saw that there was a communication jade slip in his palm. Judging from the mark, it was from the seventh god's son. He injected his divine sense into the jade slip, and the seventh god's son's voice immediately sounded in his mind. "Mr. Ji, I have good news for you. Tonight, the father has finally completed his cultivation and has come out of seclusion. I have already informed the father of what happened before, as well as your plan. The father is very happy to hear the news. He will personally come to Taiyuan City to thank you in person and discuss the plan to eliminate the demons." The seventh god's son's tone was quite excited, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders, but also full of anticipation. It seemed that he believed that if martial god Taihao and Ji Tianqing worked together, they would definitely be able to defeat the demons and kill the ancestor demon god. Ji Tianqing put away the jade slip, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Yunyao looked at him with concern and quickly asked, "Tianqing, is this a message from the seventh god son? What happened?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "The seventh god son sent me a message saying that martial god Taihao has finally completed his cultivation and has successfully come out of seclusion. Martial god Taihao knows that I'm assassinating the demons, so he wants to meet me in Taiyuan City to thank me in person and discuss the plan to eliminate the demons." Hearing this, Yunyao was immediately energized. She quickly nodded and said, "That's great. We don't have to fight alone anymore. With the help of martial god Taihao, we will definitely be able to kill the ancestor demon god and make sure that the demons will never return." As soon as Yunyao finished speaking, a dark red light suddenly appeared in the night sky not far away. Swoosh! The red light tore through the night sky and a huge gap appeared. A burly figure, 20 feet tall and shrouded in a black robe, stepped out of the gap in the void. The black-robed figure was surrounded by demonic energy and emitted a cold aura of death. It had 3 large heads, 4 thick arms, and 6 pairs of blade-like black wings on its back. There was no doubt that it was the ancestor demon god, who had shrunk 1,000 times. "Ha ha ha. You bitch, how arrogant of you. I'd like to see who's the one who won't return tonight." The ancestor demon god's body stood proudly in the night sky. Its eyes were fixed on Ji Tianqing in Yunyao's hiding place, and it sneered in a mocking tone. A muffled sound like thunder broke the silence of the night sky. At the same time, thousands of lights lit up in the silent heavenly cloud city. Tens of thousands of demon warriors rushed out of the city like a tide toward Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao immediately understood what was going on. Clearly, the ancestor demon god had arrived in Heavenly Cloud City a long time ago, but had been hiding in a different dimension. The seemingly calm Heavenly Cloud City had been prepared for an ambush, ready to strike at any moment. Ji Tianqing turned his head and looked at Yunyao beside him. He nodded at her with a look of approval. Yunyao nodded and looked at the ancestor demon god with serious eyes. Her hands clenched around her twin swords. Now that their invisibility had been seen through, the two of them decided to stop hiding and reveal themselves in the night sky. Ji Tianqing looked at the ancestor demon god with sharp eyes and said in a cold voice, "Ancestor demon god, in the past month I've killed nearly 3 million demons. Among them were hundreds of blood gods and generals, as well as 4 demon saints. You've suffered such heavy losses, yet you've been hiding, not daring to show your face. You've set up a trap in Heavenly Cloud City, waiting for me to walk right into it. You didn't dare to show yourself until I entered the city. When you heard that Taihao had come out of seclusion and that I was going to join forces with him, you jumped out." Chapter 2442. The ancestor Fian Celestial's sudden appearance confirmed Yunyao's suspicions. Ji Tianqing was sure that there were traps and ambushes in Heavenly Cloud City. At the same time, he could guess why the ancestor Fian Celestial had appeared. He was afraid that he would turn around and leave to meet up with martial god Taihao in Taiyuan City. The ancestor Fian Celestial was not angry that Ji Tianqing had exposed him. Instead, he grinned coldly. "Ji Tianqing, you have been assassinating my soldiers everywhere, but I have not shown up to stop you. Do you think I am afraid of you? What a joke. To tell you the truth, ever since I killed my way into Taihao Kingdom, I have killed nearly 500 million people. Among them, nearly 200 million warriors had their blood, qi, and souls absorbed by me, becoming nourishment for me to increase my strength. All this time, I have been cultivating in seclusion to nurture the limitless heavenly demon body. Now, not only have I cultivated the limitless heavenly demon body, but I have also reached the 3rd level of the martial god realm. Can you still laugh now? Ha ha ha. The ancestor Fian Celestial spoke the truth without hesitation. At the end, he threw his head back and laughed arrogantly. When Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao heard this, they immediately frowned and their expressions became more serious. At the same time, the great demon Saint Ling Xian personally led 20,000 elite demon warriors from Heavenly Cloud City. Swoosh! Swoosh! In the dark night sky, there were flickering figures and surging demon aura everywhere. In a short time, Ling Xian and the 20,000 elite demons surrounded Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. This area was completely surrounded, and the atmosphere in the field became cold and austere. The ancestor Fiend Celestial looked at the two of them complacently and grinned coldly. Now, you cannot escape. Don't think you can see the light of tomorrow. With that, the ancestor Fiend Celestial waved his hand and shouted coldly, "Kill them." Following the ancestor Fiend Celestial's order, Ling Xian and the 20,000 elite demons let out a roar that shook the heavens. Everyone waved their swords and halberds and roared at the top of their lungs. Demonic light and blood light covered the sky and the sun. All kinds of magic light and shadows, as well as the shadows of asuras and demons, filled the entire night sky. The darkness was dispelled, and the world became blood-red. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were surrounded, but they were not afraid. Yun Yao was wearing the dark gold divine armor. She protected herself tightly and waved her shadowless dual swords to counterattack. Pulling stars and setting moon. Snowy mountains. Following her angry roar, the sky lit up with dazzling starlight, like snowflakes falling from the sky. Light pillars and giant blades that were hundreds and thousands of meters long fell like meteors and crescent moons, bombarding the crowd. Only loud rumbling noises could be heard, reverberating in the night sky. The brilliance of the stars collided with the demonic energy and the bloody light, bursting forth with dazzling splendor that blotted out the sky. Numerous demon warriors fell down in batches like wheat being cut. Blood splattered in the crowd, bones and corpses flew in all directions, and miserable shrieks rose and fell one after another. Although Ji Tianqing did not have a divine artifact to protect himself, he had the most special and powerful divine body in the world. He had the star divine body, the thunder god body, and the heavenly sword body. Demonic spells that blotted out the sky and covered the earth poured down on him like a rainstorm, making bang 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 sounds. However, he used his divine power to form a dazzling golden shield that blocked all the attacks, and he was not injured at all. Any martial artist below the martial god realm could not hurt a single hair on his body. He waved his left hand, and a dazzling golden divine power surged out of his palm. Like a flood, it covered an area of 50 miles. There were more than 6,000 demon warriors in that area. After being engulfed by the special divine power, they were turned into ashes on the spot. Their bodies of flesh and blood were burned into black ashes, and the dense demonic energy and black energy were also purified by the divine power. He held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and instantly slashed out 108 giant swords that were thousands of meters long, killing the crowd. Instantly, thousands of demon warriors died under the divine sword light and were turned into ashes. The great battle had just begun, and Ji Tianqing had only used 2 moves to kill more than 10,000 demon warriors. Such terrifying divine power was truly like a peerless god of death, and it made people tremble in fear. The tens of thousands of surviving devil clan members and the great devil Saint Ling Xian were all dumbfounded, their eyes filled with fear. The ancestor Fiend Celestial was also stunned. The smug smile on his face froze, and it quickly became gloomy and ferocious. Kenshin. Damned bastard. You actually recovered. Not long ago, he had exchanged blows with Ji Tianqing. In the end, both sides suffered great losses, and Ji Tianqing was heavily injured and had fled in a sorry state. The ancestor Fiend Celestial had predicted that Ji Tianqing would need at least 2 years to break through to the god realm. However, he had never expected that Ji Tianqing would break through to the god realm in less than a year. Furthermore, he could tell that Ji Tianqing was not as simple as breaking through to the god realm. He had also recovered the glory of Kenshin in the past, grasping the supreme sword Dao, and could use the world-destroying divine power with a flick of his finger. At this moment, Ji Tianqing was several times stronger than Kenshin in the past. How could the ancestor Fiend Celestial not be shocked? Ha! Isn't it too late to realize it now? If not, why would I slaughter the demon army and force you to show yourself? Ji Tianqing sneered. As he replied to the ancestor Fiend Celestial, he waved his fist and sword, using his divine power. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. He waved his left fist, and a dragon elephant phantom the size of a mountain emitted a bright golden light and blasted into the demon army. The divine elephant was as majestic as a mountain, while the divine dragon was noble and dignified. The combination of the two had unparalleled power. Bam! Amidst a loud explosion, more than 2,000 demon elites were smashed into pieces by the dragon elephant divine fist. Pieces of flesh and blood that blotted out the sky rained down on the wasteland like a rainstorm, dyeing the ground dark red. In just 3 breaths, 70% of the 20,000 elite demon warriors had been slaughtered by Ji Tianqing and his wife. The remaining 5,000 were scared out of their wits. They hurriedly retreated and fled toward Heavenly Cloud City. Even the great demon Saint Ling Xian was hit by the remaining power of the dragon elephant divine fist. He flew back with blood spurting out of his 7 orifices. He was severely injured. Thus, only Ji Tianqing, his wife, and the ancestor Fiend Celestial were left in the night sky within 100 miles. The ancestor Fiend Celestial regained his senses and roared furiously. He finally attacked. Lowly beast! Bastard! Even if I grind your bones to dust, I won't be able to vent my anger. As he roared, the ancestor Fiend Celestial's body emitted a bloody light and demonic chi. He revealed his mountain-like true form. Roar! Black fog filled the sky, and bloody light surged. A pitch-black beast 10,000 meters tall appeared. This was the ancestor Fiend Celestial's true form. Moreover, he had cultivated the limitless heavenly demon physique, and his appearance had changed. His 4 sharp claws became narrower and sharper, like the claws of an eagle. The 12 wings on his back also became sharper and curved, flashing with a frightening cold light. Great heavenly demon palm! The ancestor Fiend Celestial roared. He raised his 4 palace-sized claws and slammed them down from the sky. Chapter 2443. The 4 heavenly demon palms contained the power to destroy heaven and earth. The giant palms smashed down, shattering the night sky and shattering the earth for hundreds of miles. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were under the terrifying pressure. They found it difficult to breathe and their blood almost froze. At this critical moment, Yunyao desperately urged the power of the mystic armor to defend herself. Ji Tianqing was fearless. He looked up at the ancestor demon god with a cold face and stabbed the sword in his right hand into the sky. Break! As he shouted coldly, endless divine power gushed out of his body and poured into the heaven burier sword. The sword of burial of heaven also burst with extreme power. For dazzling golden swords thousands of feet long shot up with the power to destroy everything. Kaboom! In an earth-shattering sound, the 4 giant swords and the heavenly demon palms collided, creating a violent shock wave. The golden swords and the heavenly demon palms collapsed at the same time, turning into millions of light fragments that spread in all directions. Swoosh! The shock wave of gold and black intertwined and covered 1,000 miles in the blink of an eye. In an instant, hundreds of miles of wilderness and mountains outside the city were razed to the ground, turning into ravines and ruins. Not far away, Heavenly Cloud City was hit by the shock wave and immediately activated the city's defensive array. Originally, the defensive array was only a saint-level array set up by Ling Xian. The shock wave was so powerful that it shattered the defensive array in an instant. However, the ancestor demon god had set up traps and ambushes in Heavenly Cloud City to kill Ji Tianqing. 2 invisible divine arrays were activated on the spot. 2 blood-red shields with a radius of 300 miles lit up. The blood-red shields blocked the shock wave and only trembled, but didn't collapse. Heavenly Cloud City was saved and wasn't damaged. The over 1 million devilish army garrisoned in the city also managed to escape unscathed. If it weren't for the 2 divine arrays, the entire city would have been reduced to ruins by the shock wave. The thousands of demon warriors who had fled back to the city all revealed smiles of relief after surviving a calamity. The great devil Saint Ling Xian also had a lingering fear in his heart. Ignoring his own injuries, he hurriedly commanded the city guards to maintain the operation of the divine array. 100,000 soldiers sprang into action. They poured magic into the formation, desperately trying to protect the city. At the same time, the battle outside the city became even more dangerous and intense. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao worked together to besiege the ancestral devil god. They fought a fierce battle high up in the sky, causing the heavens to crumble and the earth to rend. Yunyao was only half a step into the divine realm. She could only pose a threat to the ancestral demon god by relying on the power of the shadowless dual swords. However, the ancestral Fian Celestial's attack was extremely dangerous to her. If she was not careful, she could lose her life. Fortunately, with the protection of the dark golden divine armor, she was able to withstand the ancestral Fian Celestial's attacks and neutralize all kinds of fiendish divine arts. Even so, she was still defending more than attacking. Most of the time, they were on the defense. Occasionally, they would find an opportunity to attack and assist Ji Tianqing. Only Ji Tianqing was fearless. He attacked openly and used all kinds of divine arts to force the ancestral Fiend Celestial to retreat. Although he was only a first-level martial god, his cultivation realm was lower than the ancestral Fiend Celestials. However, he had a special divine power and a special divine body. His true combat strength was not weaker than the ancestral Fiend Celestials. What made the ancestral Fiend Celestial most frustrated was that Ji Tianqing's divine power contained the power of holy light. It was the best counter to fiendish divine arts and demonic power. Moreover, Ji Tianqing's body was filled with the blood of a divine king. His bloodline was incomparably noble and innately suppressed the ancestral Fiend Celestial. Because of this, the ancestral Fiend Celestial was at a disadvantage and was forced into a passive state. In a short span of 100 breaths, the two sides had exchanged 600 blows. As the ancestral Fiend Celestial continued to retreat, the battlefield shifted 1,000 miles to the south. It was getting further and further away from Heavenly Cloud City. Finally, Ji Tianqing seized an opportunity. The ancestral Fiend Celestial was casting a spell to block the attacks of the shadowless dual swords. At the same time, he was waving his giant claws to counterattack Yunyao. At this moment, Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to swing the Sword of Burial of Heaven and use his ultimate secret technique. Sword piercing heaven. He held the Sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and stabbed it at the ancestral Fiend Celestial with all his might. Buzz! The Sword of Burial of Heaven trembled violently and released a giant dark golden sword that was 1,000 feet long. It was pointed at the ancestral Fiend Celestial's head. The giant sword was so condensed that it seemed to be solid. The moment it appeared, it absorbed the power of the 5 elements and stars within 10,000 miles. The giant sword instantly pierced through the night sky and disappeared. In the next moment, the giant sword traversed 50 miles and appeared behind the ancestral Fiend Celestial. The ancestral Fiend Celestial was shocked. He sensed the aura of death approaching and felt a chill in his heart. However, the giant sword was only 1,000 feet away from his head. It was too late for him to teleport away. At this critical moment, he could only activate the limitless heavenly demon body and unleash his most powerful defense. His left head immediately lit up with a pitch-black cold light and formed a shield. At the same time, densely packed scales appeared on the surface of the skull. Those were the Azura scales. Asuras were the Fiend Celestials with the strongest strength and defense in the Fiend Celestials. They were best at close combat. Kaboom! The moment the Asura scales appeared, the dark golden giant sword pierced the ancestral Fiend Celestial's head and exploded with a loud sound that shook the 9 heavens. It was like the explosion of divine thunder that resounded through the clouds. Suddenly, the black light shield was smashed into pieces by the giant sword, splashing out fragments all over the sky. Following that, the giant sword destroyed the Asura scales and pierced through the ancestral Fiend Celestial's left head. Bam! The dark golden giant sword's power was finally exhausted and it shattered into pieces. However, the ancestral Fiend Celestial's left head was pierced with a huge bloody hole. Purple blood gushed out from it. The hole was so big that it took up half of his head and destroyed his entire demonic face. The ancestral Fiend Celestial's head was destroyed and could not be recovered in a short period of time. The heart-wrenching pain caused the ancestral Fiend Celestial to tremble as he roared crazily at the sky. Pieces of flesh and purple blood fell from the sky and corroded the ground into pitch-black scorched earth. The ancestral Fiend Celestial did not expect such an outcome and could not accept it. As an unparalleled great Fiend Celestial, how could he be seriously injured by a lowly human? This was an absolute humiliation. However, the ancestral Fiend Celestial did not expect that this was only the beginning of the pain. Ji Tianqing's meticulously prepared killer move was far more than this. Swish! Just as the ancestral Fiend Celestial was roaring furiously, a dazzling golden light flashed in the night sky. That golden light was only the size of a fingernail. Compared to the ancestral Fiend Celestial's 10,000-meter body, it was so small that it could be ignored. However, the power of that golden light was enough to make him tremble in fear. The next moment, the golden light pierced through the alternate space and crossed the night sky, appearing behind the ancestral Fiend Celestial. He had just been startled awake and wanted to lower his head to dodge, but he was pierced by the golden light. Bam! With a dull sound, a 3-inch dark golden flying dagger pierced through the scales and flesh on the right side of his head. Under Ji Tianqing's control, the flying dagger instantly expanded by 1,000 times. It expanded to 100 meters long and exploded with the most violent power. The result was undeniable. Chapter 2444. The ancestor Fiend Celestial's left and right heads were destroyed, and its injuries worsened. The huge bloody hole made it unrecognizable as demonic blood gushed out. The heart-wrenching pain caused it to scream and roar in anger. However, it was full of vigilance, afraid that Ji Tianqing would take the opportunity to launch another sneak attack. Up until now, it had used all of its abilities over and over again. In the end, it still could not defeat Ji Tianqing. Instead, it ended up in such a state. It had already thought of retreating. After a few feints, it turned around and fled into the distance. Swoosh! With a flash of bloody light, it teleported 150 kilometers away, leaving Ji Tianqing far behind. Immediately after, it used the space diversion divine power to tear apart the sky in front of it. Swoosh! A crack appeared in the dark sky, and it was filled with endless darkness. The ancestor Fiend Celestial did not hesitate to step into it. After passing through more than 10 layers of alternate spaces, it escaped 1,500 kilometers away. Ji Tianqing had just caught up when the crack in the void closed. He had lost the ancestor Fiend Celestial's aura, so it was extremely difficult to chase after it. He even released his divine senses to scan the surrounding 1,500 kilometers, but he could not find any trace of the ancestor Fiend Celestial. This was the limit of his divine senses. The ancestor Fiend Celestial had teleported 1,500 kilometers away. Of course, it had escaped. There was no way to chase after it. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to give up on chasing after it. He turned around and flew to Yun Yao's side. "Yao Yao, are you injured?" He looked at Yun Yao with concern and observed her injuries. Fortunately, Yun Yao's divine armor was strong enough and was not damaged at all. She had only suffered internal injuries, but it was nothing serious. Her life was not in danger. Tianqing, I'm fine. Don't worry. Yun Yao waved her hand, indicating to Ji Tianqing that he did not need to worry. Seeing that she was fine, Ji Tianqing was relieved. Dawn had passed, and the sky gradually brightened. Dawn also rose in the eastern horizon. Ji Tianqing turned to look in the direction of Sky Cloud. His face was expressionless. The archdemon escaped. It's a shame we couldn't kill it. However, the demons in Heavenly Cloud cannot be allowed to live. With that, he led Yun Yao toward Sky Cloud. Before long they were back outside Sky Cloud. Sky Cloud City was still protected by the Crimson Shield. 100,000 soldiers were doing their best to maintain the operation of the Great Defensive Formation. The situation in the city could be clearly seen. More than 1 million demon soldiers and hundreds of thousands of demonized civilians were all armed and ready for battle. Seeing that the demon race army had not fled, Ji Tianqing felt slightly relieved. Ling Xian isn't stupid. Defending Sky Cloud is the right thing to do. If I lose to the ancestral fiend god, there is no need for the devil army to flee. If I defeat the ancestral devil god, it would be useless for them to escape. Once they leave Sky Cloud's protection, I'll slaughter them all. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. His lips curved in a mocking smirk. But the first demon god is gone. Even if the demon army stays in Sky Cloud, they're doomed. With that, he gripped the sword of burial of heaven and flew to the southern gates. He hovered proudly in the air above. He looked down at the crimson shield from above. His pupils turned golden as he used his mystic sight to observe the city's defensive formation. The demon soldiers near the southern gates stared at him warily. Their eyes were filled with shock and fear. When they saw him emerge unscathed, and the archdemon god nowhere to be seen, the demons could guess the result. Without a doubt, the archdemon god had lost. Suddenly, the crowd was in an uproar. Countless demons whispered to each other, their faces filled with fear and unease. Even when the demon generals ordered their soldiers to remain silent, it was to no avail. Morale was shaken, and the demons' last shred of confidence was crumbling. Unless the archdemon god appeared, there was no turning back. Panic spread through the demon army and gradually spread into the city. Half an hour later, Ji Tianqing broke through the divine formation and started casting spells to break the formation. By this time, news of the archdemon's defeat had spread throughout Sky Cloud. The demon army of more than 1 million fell into panic and worry. Many demon generals were at a loss. The ordinary demon race warriors were even more terrified and had thoughts of retreating. Boom! With a thunderous boom, Ji Tianqing wielded the sword of burial of heaven and fiercely slashed at the bloody barrier. A large gap appeared on the tough and thick blood-red shield, and dense cracks extended in all directions. Shwa! Ji Tianqing's figure flickered. Burial of heaven in hand, he stepped through the gap and charged into the city. Yun Yao followed close behind. Clad in her dark golden armor and clutching her twin swords, she charged into the city. A fierce battle immediately unfolded. Shwa! Ji Tianqing stepped into the air and swung the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand. A dazzling golden sword light hundreds of meters long was slashed out. Boom! The giant sword slashed at the southern gate, shattering the gate and the city walls within a radius of thousands of meters. More than 2,000 demon soldiers guarding the gate were killed on the spot. They were all smashed to pieces. Hundreds of surviving Devil Clan members screamed in fright, then turned around and fled. Yun Yao swung her sword again and slashed out a few more shadowless swords. Another series of muffled sounds rang out. The hundreds of demons were also reduced to ashes. Not even their corpses were intact. With the destruction of the southern gate and the death of the 3,000 city guards, the one-sided massacre officially began. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao pushed forward from the left and right. They used all kinds of sword techniques to kill all the demon soldiers in the city. Skycloud City immediately fell into chaos. Shocking roars and roars rang out in the city. There were also terrified and desperate curses. Many demon generals realized that if they continued to defend Skycloud City, they would be wiped out. Therefore, a large number of demon generals led the blood gods and elite warriors to besiege Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. They didn't expect to kill Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. They only hoped to stop them and buy time for the demon army to retreat. Two completely different scenes appeared in the chaotic Skycloud City. A large number of demon generals, blood gods, and elite warriors rushed to the southern gate from all directions. They risked their lives to stop Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. The demon army, which was as numerous as the hairs on an ox, fled the southern part of the city. They rushed desperately to the northern gate and escaped from Skycloud City. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Ji Tianqing took the lead. He faced dozens of demon generals and blood gods alone. He swung his sword and sent out golden light that filled the sky. More than 600 dazzling golden sword lights formed a sword array that was 10 miles wide and fell from the sky. More than 40 demon generals and blood gods were enveloped by the sword array. They were quickly ground to dust. Those blood gods had special constitutions. They could recover even if they were ground to pieces. However, Ji Tianqing's divine power just happened to restrain them. Chapter 24:45. 15 minutes later, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao had reached the city square. Hundreds of generals and 200 blood gods had come to stop them, but they had all been killed. In the process, more than 200,000 demon race soldiers also died under their swords. From the southern gate to the city square, the buildings and streets along the way had been reduced to rubble. The ground was littered with the remains of demon soldiers, and even the earth was soaked in demon blood. Soon, Ji Tianqing killed his way into one of the devil race's camps. An entire army of 600,000 demons had been stationed here. At this point, more than half of the devil army had already fled. There were only about 200,000 people left in the camp. Ji Tianqing hovered over the camp, clutching the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand. He pointed it toward the heavens and shouted, "Rain of swords." Instantly, the sky lit up with a dazzling starlight. 10,000 points of starlight emerged. Tens of thousands of stellar swords rained down like a meteor shower, enveloping the entire demon race camp. Boom, 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 boom. The massive starry swords came crashing down, covering a radius of 50 miles. An earth-shattering sound rang out. In the blink of an eye, the demon camp had been reduced to rubble, leaving only a deep crater in its wake. More than 200,000 demons had been reduced to nothing. Not a single corpse was left intact. The force of the impact was so great that it shook the entire city. The ground cracked open, and countless fissures opened up in its wake. The large group of devil army that was fleeing was also thrown off their feet by the shockwave. This was the power of a war god. A single blow annihilated more than 200,000 demons. Such power was enough to destroy the heavens and earth. Millions of demons were scared out of their wits when they witnessed this horrifying scene with their own eyes. They were even more panicked. They rushed toward the northern gate, crowding it so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Seeing this scene, the demon general guarding the northern gate promptly gave the order to close the great city barrier formation. Whoosh! Once the crimson barrier was gone, the sky above the northern gate was clear. Many demon soldiers didn't have time to escape through the city gates, so they took to the skies and fled. Ji Tianqing was currently using his divine ability in the city, wantonly slaughtering the devil soldiers. When he saw the situation at the north gate, he frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Yao Yao, I'll leave the demons in the city to you. I'll intercept them. He sent a telepathic message to Yunyao. Then, he rushed to the top of the North City Gate in a flash and started a massacre. 7-star sword. 5-colored divine lightning. Ji Tianqing brandished the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand, while his left hand unleashed an earth-shattering 5-colored divine thunder, which poured down on the demon army. With the northern city gate as the center, the area within a radius of 50 miles had turned into a lightning purgatory. Hundreds of thousands of the devil race army were engulfed by the monstrous lightning and immediately turned into ashes. The dazzling golden sword descended from the heavens and took the lives of tens of thousands of demons. Ji Tianqing turned his head and looked outside the city. He saw hundreds of thousands of demons fleeing across the wasteland north of the city like a black tide. Slowly, he raised his left fist. His entire arm glowed with golden light and he punched out with it. Dracophant fist. The image of a dracophant as large as a mountain fell from the sky like a dazzling golden sun. Boom! With an earth-shattering boom, the 300 miles of wasteland was reduced to rubble. It became a giant crater, like an abyss. An endless cloud of dust rose into the air, covering the sky for thousands of miles. The destructive power of the explosion rushed into the earth, causing the earth to tremble for thousands of miles. The hundreds of thousands of demons who had fled the city thought they'd escaped with their lives. In the end, they couldn't escape their fate of being slaughtered. They were all reduced to ashes. After this attack, only 500,000 demons remained. They were still in the city, too late to escape. Seeing the hundreds of thousands of devil army soldiers that had escaped from the city being killed by Ji Tianqing with a single punch, they were all horrified and in complete despair. What's more, the ancestor demon god never showed himself. Demon Saint Ling Xian was nowhere to be found. More than 100 generals had been killed. Without a leader, the demon army was in a state of disunity. They had no fighting power to speak of. Their fate was self-evident. 2 hours later, the earth-shattering slaughter was over. The smoke and dust that covered the sky, the demonic energy and black fog that had covered the sky, gradually dissipated. The loud rumbling sound reverberated in the sky and gradually faded away. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao stood side by side in the sky above the city. They looked down at the scorched wasteland. Indeed, after nearly 2 hours of fighting, all of Skycloud City had been destroyed. Dozens of giant craters littered the land for thousands of miles. The ruins that were soaked in demonic blood had turned black and red, like scorched earth that had been burned by a raging fire. As far as the eye could see, the ground was littered with craters, ravines, and skeletons. Not a single complete corpse could be found. Skycloud City had been utterly destroyed. Not even the broken walls and bricks remained. But Ji Tianqing and Yunyao didn't feel sorry. War was about destruction and destruction. Chapter 2446. Yunyao entered the world within the sword and went into seclusion to recover. Ji Tianqing left the ruins of Heavenly Cloud City and flew north alone. Although he had used up a lot of his divine power and was a little tired after a series of battles, it was not a big deal. He was a martial god. He was already a peerless martial god and possessed a unique divine body. He could merge with heaven and earth and communicate with the stars in the sky. He did not need to cultivate at all. His divine body could absorb the power of heaven and earth and the stars at any time to replenish his divine power. After flying north for 3 days, his divine power was fully replenished and he was back to peak condition. During this time, he sent a message to the 7th god's child. He told the 7th god's child about the ancestor fiend god's defeat, the destruction of Heavenly Cloud City, and the destruction of the demon army. The 7th god's child was overjoyed. He could not believe it and was full of excitement. He hurriedly sent back a message saying that he had passed the news to martial god Taihao and expressed his most sincere gratitude to Ji Tianqing. As for the aftermath, he would send someone to do it as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing did not need to worry. Knowing that Ji Tianqing wanted to take advantage of the victory and kill the ancestor fiend god, he also agreed and looked forward to it. Ji Tianqing flew north because he wanted to leave the divine kingdom of Taihao and rushed to Dark North Mountain. He guessed that after the ancestor fiend god was seriously injured, he would most likely flee back to Dark North Mountain to hide and heal. As long as he could get to Dark North Mountain as soon as possible and find the ancestor fiend god, victory would be assured. Soon, 4 days passed. Ji Tianqing traveled continuously for 4 days and crossed half of the divine kingdom of Taihao and arrived at the northern border of the divine kingdom. With his current strength, using the Void Step's divine ability, his speed had reached an extremely shocking level. That evening, he flew past a main city on the border. Looking down from the sky, he saw that the 100,000 demon clan troops stationed in the city were moving north. Obviously, the demon army had also heard the news and decided to abandon the city and flee back to Dark North Mountain. Ji Tianqing immediately guessed that the 3 million demon army in the divine kingdom of Taihao were probably retreating. Since he was passing by and saw them, he would not be merciful. He casually used a divine power and cast a 5-colored lightning that covered the sky and poured down on the ground below. Boom 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 boom. The lightning pillars that covered the sky covered a radius of 100 miles and blasted the entire main city into ruins. The 100,000 devil race soldiers were not spared either. They were instantly annihilated. Originally, their morale was low and they retreated unwillingly. They didn't expect a calamity to descend from the heavens and divine lightning to fill the sky. To the demon race army, such an outcome was akin to suffering the wrath of heaven, a divine punishment. By the time the earth-shattering explosion and the dust that covered the sky dissipated, Ji Tianqing was already far away. 8 days later, Ji Tianqing entered the northern Nether Mountain region. On the night of the 9th day, he arrived at the heart of the North Underworld Mountain and approached the North Underworld Palace. The night sky was as dark as ink, shrouded in black fog and devil chi. Not a trace of starlight could be seen. The world was cold and austere, and only the endless cold wind whistled. Ji Tianqing flew in the air and looked in front of him expressionlessly. The killing intent in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. However, when he was 2,000 miles away from Baiming Palace, he suddenly saw a bloody light in the night sky. Roar! Following the appearance of the dazzling bloody light, there was a deep roar that sounded like thunder and was filled with anger. The deafening roar was like the awakening of an ancient ferocious beast or the roar of a peerless demon. Ji Tianqing was no stranger to this. His eyes immediately turned cold, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. This is the voice of the ancestor fiend celestial. It really escaped back to Baiming Palace. However, it should be in seclusion to heal its injuries. Why is it roaring? Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and muttered doubtfully. At this moment, the sky in front of him lit up with a 5-colored light and bloody fire that covered the sky. A series of loud rumbling noises came from the night sky. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing immediately understood that the ancestor fiend celestial was fighting with someone. Moreover, the other party must be a martial god expert. This is strange. Which martial god would arrive at Baiming Palace before me to assassinate the ancestor fiend celestial? Ji Tianqing was even more confused. He sped up. After a few breaths, he had crossed 2,000 miles of the night sky and arrived near Baiming Palace. Above the vast wasteland, 2 figures were fighting in the night sky. One of them was a huge black beast that was 10,000 meters tall. It looked terrifying and ferocious. It had 3 huge heads. It was the ancestor fiend celestial. To Ji Tianqing's disbelief, the bloody holes on its left and right heads had healed. On the surface, it looked like it had recovered and all the wounds on its body had disappeared. After careful observation, one could see that it had only recovered a small part of its injuries. It only had about 70% of its strength left and its aura was still a little chaotic. This result was in line with Ji Tianqing's expectations. After all, the ancestor Fiend Celestial had cultivated the limitless heavenly demon body. It had strong defense and insane recovery ability. Ji Tianqing turned to look at the other figure. It was the martial god who was fighting with the ancestor Fiend Celestial. It was a middle-aged man who was close to 10 feet tall. He was wearing starry silver armor and a cape with dragon patterns on his shoulders. He was burly and had a dignified face. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes. He had a domineering aura. Although he was as small as an ant compared to the ancestor Fiend Celestial, he had a martial god level. However, he possessed the strength of the LV6 martial god realm. He performed powerful and domineering divine powers and fought the ancestor Fiend Celestial to a standstill. Ji Tianqing was familiar with this martial god of the human clan. It was martial god Taihao. Seeing the situation in the night sky, Ji Tianqing's eyebrows relaxed and he curled his lips into a smile. This guy is really impatient. He actually reached Baiming Palace before me. At the same time, martial god Taihao and the ancestor Fiend Celestial sensed Ji Tianqing's arrival. Both sides exchanged a blow, and a shockwave that covered the sky burst forth. Both sides used the momentum to retreat, maintaining a distance of 50 kilometers as they faced each other in the night sky. Furthermore, both of them turned to look at Ji Tianqing with different expressions. The ancestor Fiend Celestial frowned fiercely. His expression became ferocious, and his 6 eyes were filled with bitter hatred. Martial god Taihao heaved a sigh of relief. It was as if he had regained his confidence, and he revealed a relaxed smile. He bowed to Ji Tianqing from afar and said with a smile, "Lord Kenshin, welcome back. We meet again." Everyone in the Shinwu continent knew that Kenshin had taught martial god Taihao in the past, and the two of them had some friendship. At this moment it was natural for martial god Taihao to say such words. However, only the two of them knew that martial god Taihao was not talking about this matter. Instead, 8 years ago, when Ji Tianqing had left the Taihao kingdom, he had met martial god Taihao once. At that time, the two of them had met secretly and talked about many things with hidden meanings. Chapter 2447. In just 8 short years, Ji Tianqing had gone from a primordial spirit realm cultivator to an unparalleled martial god. Such a drastic change could be said to be earth-shattering. Even though martial god Taihao had a premonition, he was still shocked and felt like he was in a dream. His thoughts returned to more than 1,000 years ago, when he had been taught by Kenshin. At that time, the sword god could be said to be in high spirits. He was the best in the world and no one could compare to him. Looking at the current Ji Tianqing, he was even better than the sword god back then. Martial god Taihao found it hard to imagine what kind of brilliance Ji Tianqing would blossom in the future. What kind of changes would he bring to Shinwu continent? Just as martial god Taihao was filled with emotions and was in a daze, a sudden change occurred in the field. Behind him, a blinding light suddenly lit up in the night sky thousands of meters away. Whoosh! The dazzling golden light tore through the night sky, creating a gap. A tall and sturdy figure wearing golden robes and a crown rushed out of the gap. This person held a 1-meter-long sword with both hands, and a dazzling golden and silver sword ray shot out from it, aiming straight for martial god Taihao's back. The sword ray was dazzling and contained a peerless sharpness that could destroy anything. Martial god Taihao immediately reacted and realized that he was in mortal danger. However, the two were too close, and his opponent did not give him a chance to teleport away. At this critical moment, he could only instinctively release his divine power and condense a divine shield around his body. Boom! A deafening explosion resounded through the sky. The golden and silver sword ray pierced through martial god Taihao's divine shield and his silver armor, piercing through his back and protruding from his chest. The divine shield collapsed, and golden fragments of light burst out and scattered in the night sky. Faint golden divine blood spurted out from martial god Taihao's chest, a ghastly sight under the golden light. Keek keek. In the night sky 50 kilometers away, the ancestral demon god was circulating his energy to heal himself as he sneered, his expression sinister and gloomy. Heh 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 heh. The golden-robed man who suddenly appeared also sneered proudly. Holding the hilt with both hands, he suddenly pulled out the divine sword and sneered in a mocking tone, Tai Hao. Long time no see. This is my greeting gift to you. Do you like it? The sharp sword intent left martial god Tai Hao's body and messed up his organs. Pfff, he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His face turned as pale as a sheet of paper, and his aura fluctuated violently. However, he ignored his injuries and turned around to glare at the golden-robed man. Seeing the golden-robed man's face, he was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He roared in a hoarse voice, Tianju. You despicable person. Martial god Tai Hao pointed a trembling finger at Tianju as he cursed. His face was filled with disbelief. You actually, colluded with the ancestral devil god? Colluding with the devil race? Martial god Tai Hao clearly didn't expect martial god Tianju, one of the leaders of the human race, to be so shameless as to collude with the devil race. Since ancient times, the devil race had always been the mortal enemy of the human race. In the past 3,000 years, martial god Tai Hao thought he understood martial god Tianju. In his opinion, Tianju was just ambitious and unwilling to accept the current situation. He would never abandon his conscience and betray the human race. However, it seemed like he didn't understand Tianju at all. That was why martial god Tai Hao was so angry. Ji Tianqing didn't have much of a reaction. He wasn't surprised at all. After all, he already knew about Tianju colluding with the ancestral devil god. He only thought that martial god Tianju had appeared at such a crucial moment and severely injured Tai Hao with one blow. This was probably not a coincidence. It was premeditated. As expected, the ancestral devil god gave martial god Tianju a look of approval and said with a smile, "Well done. Although you didn't act according to the original plan and attacked earlier. Our goal has been achieved by severely injuring martial god Tai Hao." Martial god Tianju cupped his fists and said with a smile, "The plan is dead, but the person is alive. In our original plan, we didn't expect Ji Tianqing to appear. Unfortunately, we only severely injured Tai Hao. If we could kill him with one blow or destroy his divine body, that would be perfect." As he spoke, martial god Tianju showed a regretful expression. Martial god Tai Hao covered his bleeding chest with his hand. He was so angry that he trembled and his eyes were covered with a layer of red. "Tianju! You bastard, you betrayed the human race and colluded with the great demon lord. You will die a horrible death." Martial god Tianju held the golden sword and looked at him with a smile. He said coldly, Tai Hao, you're still as pedantic and stupid as before. Can't you see the reality now? Tonight, you're the one who will die without a burial ground. As for me, I will follow in the footsteps of the great demon lord and obtain the method to ascend to the upper realm. I will leave this rotten and sealed world. Then, martial god Tianju looked up to the sky and laughed proudly. Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at Tianju coldly. He said coldly, "Compared to the evil ancestor demon god, you, the scum who betrayed the human race, deserve to die even more. Tianju, I'm here tonight to bury the demon race. Since you're here, it saves me the trouble of looking for you. I'll send you on your way." Martial god Tianju laughed again and sneered mockingly, "Ahahaha. Kenshin, I didn't expect you to be so arrogant after reincarnating. You and Tai Hao, that trash, want to kill us? Keep on dreaming. Don't forget, other than me and the great demon lord, you still have a strong enemy, the dragon-subduing general of the Heaven Punisher tribe. I advise you to think about it carefully. Do you want to die by our sword or by the dragon-subduing general's saber? Ji Tianqing's brows relaxed, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold sneer. You scum, demons and beasts will all be killed by me one by one. None of you will be spared. Your last words end here. You can die in peace. As soon as he finished speaking, Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared into thin air without a trace. He used the Absolute Shadow's divine ability to merge with the sky, earth, night and space. His whereabouts and aura turned into nothingness and no one could guard against him. The ancestor demon god and martial god Tianju lost track of Ji Tianqing's aura and traces. They immediately became alert. Especially the ancestor demon god, his huge body shrunk and his nerves were tense as he defended with all his might. Martial god Tianju was also alert. He released his divine consciousness to search the surroundings and held the golden divine sword tightly, ready to counterattack. However, 10 breaths of time passed. The night was empty and nothing happened. Ji Tianqing did not appear. Chapter 2448. Although martial god Tianju knew that Ji Tianqing would not be scared away, he was comforting himself. He also wanted to attack martial god Taihao's morale and provoke Ji Tianqing to show himself. As expected. Just as he finished speaking, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the night sky behind him. Whoosh! A golden spear that was more than 10 feet long pierced out of the darkness and aimed at martial god Tianju's back. Martial god Tianju was prepared. The moment the golden spear appeared, he relaxed his brows and let out a sigh of relief. He turned around without hesitation and slashed down with the divine sword with both hands. Kaboom! Amidst an earth-shattering boom, the dazzling golden sword struck the golden divine spear. Both of them collapsed at the same time, exploding into pieces that covered the sky and covered the earth, shooting out in all directions. The violent impact caused martial god Tianju to fly backwards. He let out a painful groan as blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The peerlessly terrifying power still injured his internal organs. However, it was only a minor injury, nothing serious. Martial god Tianju sneered and said disdainfully, "Humph. Kenshin. That's all you've got." However, martial god Tianju did not expect that once Ji Tianqing attacked, he would succeed. The god-killing spear was only the beginning of the assassination. Whoosh! Just as martial god Tianju let down his guard, another 3-inch-long golden light appeared in the night sky in front of him out of nowhere. Amidst the dazzling golden light was a 3-inch-long flying dagger. When the flying knife appeared, it was less than 100 feet away from martial god Tianju. Even though martial god Tianju sensed that something was wrong and his pupils contracted and his nerves tensed, he could not dodge it in time. Bang! There was a muffled explosion. The god-slaying flying dagger pierced through martial god Tianju's divine power shield and the armor he wore under his golden robe. It pierced his chest and flew out of his back, bringing with it a large amount of flesh and organs. The terrifying impact caused martial god Tianju's body to tremble. The heart-wrenching pain caused his face to twist, and he couldn't help but let out a miserable howl. Swish! The flying dagger turned into an arc in the night sky and disappeared into the darkness, hiding again. On martial god Tianju's chest, there was a bloody hole the size of a bowl. He had mocked martial god Taihao for being a piece of trash. He was severely injured too. His condition was the same as martial god Taihao's. The heart-wrenching pain and intense humiliation made martial god Tianju furious. He was about to go crazy. Ah! Ji Tianqing. This god will tear you apart alive. Seeing this, martial god Taihao, who was in the night sky not far away, forgot about his pain and burst out laughing. Ha ha ha. Tianju, you didn't expect retribution to come so quickly, did you? This god already said earlier, you're destined to die a horrible death. With Lord Kenshin here, you will be crushed to pieces and reduced to ashes. Martial god Tianju was infuriated by his mockery. Bloody flames surged out of his body, and his murderous aura almost materialized. Only the ancestor fiend god was not angry. He remained calm and rational. While Tianju and Taihao were talking, he silently released his ultimate killer move and attacked Taihao. Whoosh! A pitch-black 9 demonic blade that was 1,000 feet long quietly cut through the night sky and slashed at Taihao. The mysterious and cold demonic blade contained terrifying calamity power, and it was about to kill Taihao instantly. At the critical moment, Taihao sensed death approaching. He immediately calmed his mind and focused on dealing with the attack. Black Tortoise Big Dipper Shield. Taihao waved his palms with a solemn expression, releasing divine power without regard for anything. He activated the Big Dipper godly fire in the sky and the Black Tortoise black water in the endless sky sea. Whoosh! Endless white divine fire descended from the sky, and icy black water surged out from the ground, forming a black and white shield around Taihao like a huge ball of light. Fire and water were originally incompatible, but under Taihao's guidance, they naturally merged together and cycled back and forth. This Black Tortoise Big Dipper shield was Taihao's ultimate divine power, and it had unparalleled defensive power. Kaboom! The next moment, the 9 demonic blade fell from the sky and slashed at the black and white shield. There was a deafening explosion that shook the sky. The 9 demonic blade collapsed, shattering into black light shards that blotted out the sky, and a vast amount of black energy burst out. The mysterious black energy filled the area within a few hundred miles. A huge crack appeared on Taihao's Black Tortoise Big Dipper shield, and dense cracks appeared. Taihao's body trembled from the impact, and his face was as pale as paper. Faint golden divine blood spurted out of his nose and mouth, and his body bent over. However, he forced himself to endure the injury and used his divine power to quickly repair the shield. Seeing that the black and white shield had recovered, he finally let out a sigh of relief and wanted to circulate his energy to suppress the injury. However, he suddenly felt a burning pain on his back and legs, and the meridians all over his body started to twitch. He looked down and found that there were thousands of wisps of black energy wrapped around his legs and body. The silver divine armor he wore couldn't resist the corrosion of the black energy. His flesh and skin were rotting at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning into puffs of rotten black ash. The mysterious and cold black energy was the calamity power contained in the 9 demonic blade. What was even more frightening was that Taihao's eyes were gradually blurring, and his mind was becoming muddled. Thousands of images of disasters, demons, and ghosts appeared in his mind, eroding his sea of consciousness and divine soul. This was the true power of the calamity power. Taihao's expression changed, and it became extremely ugly. He couldn't care less about maintaining the black and white shield, and he didn't have time to attack. He could only retreat in a panic and flee thousands of miles away. After he was far away from the battlefield, he hurriedly took out 12 golden divine needles and pierced them into his 12 main meridians. The divine needles emitted a bright golden light, sealing his flesh and meridians to resist the corrosion of the calamity power. At the same time, Taihao circulated his divine art to keep his divine soul clear, and tried his best to dissolve the calamity power. In this way, he could only focus on protecting himself, and couldn't help Ji Tianqing at all. Ji Tianqing's situation also became dangerous, as he was besieged by Tianju and the ancestor fiend god. Sun and moon shine together. Martial god Tianju saw the hope of killing Ji Tianqing. He ignored his injuries and waved his divine sword with all his strength, slashing out a bright and dazzling divine light. Gold and silver intertwined brilliance poured down on Ji Tianqing like a flood that could overturn the heavens. The ancestor fiend god also waved his 4 giant palms, sending out balls of black calamity demonic power, and bombarding Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was beaten back, and his figure flickered in the night sky, constantly changing his position to avoid the two's attacks. Chapter 24-49. A Sword of Life. Ji Tianqing suddenly appeared above martial god Tianju's head. He swung the burial of heaven with his right hand and slashed down. The pitch-black and cold burial of heaven gave off a dazzling golden light. 1,000-foot-long blurry sword light with a mysterious and extraordinary power descended on martial god Tianju's head. This sword art wasn't the sword Dao divine power created by Kenshin 1,000 years ago. It was the first sword Dao divine power that Ji Tianqing created after reaching the immortal state. That's right, it was a secret art that he created based on his own experience and comprehension. This sword art wasn't an ordinary sword art. There was no terrifying light or sound, nor was there a huge and shocking appearance. Even the sword light itself was blurry and hard to determine. At first glance, it looked like he didn't have enough divine power and had slashed out when he was on the verge of death. But in reality, this sword art contained the domineering and unparalleled power of a sword that reaches heaven and the ethereal and simple feeling of a floating life like a dream. Think about it, Ji Tianqing was the unparalleled Kenshin in his last life and had reached the peak of the world. But at the peak, at the most glorious moment, he fell from the altar and was reborn as a young man. And now, this young man had returned to the immortal state after going through all kinds of hardships. The ups and downs of his past life and present life, and the journey of his heart, how complicated were the feelings and understandings he had gained from it. It was precisely because of this that the single sword of life was so mysterious, possessing both powerful and complex might. Only Ji Tianqing could create such a miraculous sword art. Even Kenshin couldn't do it back then. Whoosh! The blurry sword light arrived in front of him. Martial god Tianju was filled with fear and despair, but his mind was eroded by the illusions and he became a little dazed. That was an invisible sword intent. It didn't have any killing power, but it silently invaded his divine soul and he couldn't block it. His mind was naturally affected and became confused. He seemed to be smiling but not smiling, in pain but not pain, sad and confused, bam. With a muffled sound, the blurry sword light hit martial god Tianju and woke him up instantly. But it was too late. The golden robe and soft armor he wore were cut into pieces. Even his divine body was split in half from head to toe. Blood splattered everywhere. The two bloody halves of the body flew to the left and right and fell from the night sky. It was still clearly visible that the eyes on his face, which had been split into two halves, were wide open in terror, and there was still a trace of terror on his face. This sudden turn of events stunned the ancestral fiend celestial. His 6 eyes widened in shock. It could not believe that Tianju, a LV6 martial god, had been killed by Ji Tianqing with a single slash. This was too terrifying. Whoosh! At this moment, a gold and silver divine sold divine Ju's half Tianju. That was martial god Tianju's god. His Ju half was Ju Tianju's god Ju Tianju's god Tianju's Yu's Tianjuyu. It could be said that he was lucky enough to keep his life. Tianju's god body was destroyed and his god soul was severely injured. He was scared out of his wits. He even forgot to curse Ji Tianqing and turned to flee to the north in a panic. Lord Demon God, please stop Ji Tianqing. I need time to heal. As he fled, Tianju didn't forget to call for help, asking the ancestor Demon God to stop Ji Tianqing. Seeing that he was still alive, the ancestor demon god Tianju heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing Ji Tianqing chasing after Tianju with a sword, he quickly teleported over to stop him. Ji Tianqing! Don't be so arrogant. The ancestor demon god Tianju shouted coldly. He flapped the 12 black wings on his back and released the Shura demon blades to kill Ji Tianqing. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Thousands of Shura demon blades streaked across the night sky, forming a blade net that covered a radius of 10 miles, enveloping Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing relied on his powerful god body and didn't use any defensive techniques to defend himself. Instead, he attacked fiercely with his sword. Swish! 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 He swung his sword and slashed out hundreds of dazzling golden sword lights at the Shura demon blades. Pang, pang, pang. Hundreds of Azura demonic blades and dazzling golden sword lights shattered into pieces. Even though dozens of Shura demon blades stabbed Ji Tianqing, they couldn't hurt him. They only left some scratches on his skin. Furthermore, after the Shura demon blades shattered, they exploded with surging black gas. The mysterious and powerful calamity energy immediately enveloped Ji Tianqing, corroding his god body and corroding his god soul. When the ancestor demon god Tianju saw Ji Tianqing wrapped in black gas, he instantly sneered. He. Now you know how powerful this god is. Have you tasted the 3 calamities and 9 disasters? The ancestor demon god Tianju was very pleased. He thought that he would be able to see Ji Tianqing suffer under the calamities and calamities. However, the next scene left him dumbfounded. Boom! Ji Tianqing actually blasted the black gas away with a punch and rushed out unscathed. He held his sword and charged at the escaping martial god Tianju. The calamity energy surrounding him was actually unable to enter his body. The moment it touched his god body, it was dispersed. No. This is impossible. The ancestor demon god Tianju was stunned and exclaimed in disbelief. He hurriedly used the demon god eye. His 6 eyes emitted a dazzling purple light as he carefully observed Ji Tianqing, trying to figure out what was going on. The next moment, the scene in his eyes changed. Ji Tianqing's figure became blurry, leaving only a white outline. It was that holy white energy that blocked the corrosion of the calamity energy. Especially, in Ji Tianqing's head, there was a blazing white gem that was shining with holy light. It was as bright as the stars. Seeing this scene, the ancestor demon god Tianju finally understood the reason. It's light. It's actually the light divine power. Damn Ji Tianqing, how could he have obtained the light divine power? That is a power that only god kings can control. How could he? No, he seemed to be a god king in his previous life. Thinking of this, the ancestor demon god Tianju's expression became extremely ugly. His eyes also became extremely solemn. As an ancient great demon god, he naturally knew that the light divine power was the demon race's greatest nemesis. He had never forgotten how he was killed and dismembered in the ancient god war and fell in the starry sky. Just as the ancestor demon god Tianju was feeling complicated and hesitant, the situation changed again. Ji Tianqing teleported 3,000 miles away and caught up with the escaping martial god Tianju. Tianju was only left with an injured divine soul. He was extremely weak and could not use his teleportation ability. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had caught up, he used his divine power at all costs and tore open the dark sky, wanting to escape into an alternate space. However, just as he tore open a gap in the night sky, he was pierced by a 3-inch golden light. Bam! Within the golden light was the 3-inch long god-slaying flying dagger. Following a dull explosion, the god-slaying flying dagger pierced into the divine soul and burst out with a destructive divine power. After suffering such a destructive blow, Tianju's divine soul collapsed on the spot, exploding into dozens of gold and silver fragments that scattered into the night sky. Chapter 2450. Martial god Tianju was dead. One of the leaders of the human race had fallen in Dark North Mountain just like that. However, Ji Tianqing did not feel regretful. He only felt happy and relieved. After all, martial god Tianju deserved to be executed. If not for his scheme and help, the ancestral fiend god would not have been revived. The Tianxian continent and Shenwu continent would not have suffered a destructive attack and plunged their lives into misery and suffering. To be fair, martial god Tianju was an accomplice of the demons and one of the main culprits. Whoosh! Whoosh! More than 30 gold and silver spirit fragments scattered in the night sky like butterflies. With a wave of his hand, Ji Tianqing collected the divine soul fragments. He had never forgotten that there was still a young man riding a koan in the divine tower. He was still a remnant soul and urgently needed to recover his strength. At the same time, the ancestral fiend god turned into a blood-colored stream of light and flew over from afar. He had just arrived at the scene when he saw Ji Tianqing killing martial god Tianju. Witnessing this scene with its own eyes, its entire body shook, and its 6 eyes widened in shock. Deep fear flashed across its eyes. No matter what, he had not expected the outcome to be like this. He had been confident that with martial god Tianju's help, he would definitely be able to kill Taihao and Ji Tianqing. However, he had not expected that martial god Tianju would die before Taihao. Ji Tianqing's strength had reached such a terrifying level. Now that it was left to fight alone, how could it resist Ji Tianqing's peerless might? With this thought, the ancestral fiend god retreated without hesitation and fled toward Dark North Palace. Whoosh! He cut through the night sky like lightning and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. He wanted to escape back to the Blood Sea Abyss as soon as possible and borrow its power to resist Ji Tianqing. Not far away, Ji Tianqing had just collected martial god Tianju's spirit fragments when he saw the ancestral fiend god turn around and flee. He raised his eyebrows and sneered. He muttered, he charged over so aggressively, but he turned around and fled in fear. The dignified ancestral demon god has actually been reduced to such a state. Looks like he's at the end of the road and will definitely die. As he spoke, Ji Tianqing took the sword of burial of heaven and flew towards Baiming Palace. After a short 10 breaths, he returned to the sky above Baiming Palace. Baiming Palace was brightly lit, and there were hundreds of blood-red demonic lights flashing. Hundreds of demon race guards and experts were standing guard outside the palace with swords in their hands, looking murderous and ready to fight. Inside the palace, many demons were running around in a panic, running away in a panic. Under the curtain of night, there were shadows everywhere, and there were constant cries of surprise, curses, and roars. Ji Tianqing scanned Baiming Palace with his consciousness and immediately confirmed that the ancestral fiend celestial was not inside. His consciousness went past Baiming Palace and probed behind the mountain peak. He found a huge, pitch-black abyss. The blood energy in the abyss overflowed into the heavens, surging with dark red blood light, rising into the sky with demonic mist and black energy. The ancestral fiend celestial had already dived into the abyss and was stirring up the boundless sea of blood, crazily devouring the power of the sea of blood. The sea of blood was formed by the blood energy and souls of billions of living beings. It released countless red threads that entered the ancestral fiend celestial's body. As a result, the injuries on its body healed rapidly, and its strength was also recovering. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing frowned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. The ancestral fiend celestial is an ancient fiend celestial, and it has the great abilities of the blood demon path and the Azura demon path. It also has the power of the 3 calamities and 9 tribulations. If it escapes tonight, it only needs to slaughter the common people to absorb the blood and souls of billions of living beings, returning to its peak state. Even if the demon race is exterminated, as long as it is alive, it will be an endless disaster. Ji Tianqing made up his mind, and slowly raised his left hand, crazily accumulating divine power. In the blink of an eye, he clenched his left hand into a fist, and with boundless power, he punched the abyss of the sea of blood. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. His left fist emitted boundless golden light, condensing into the phantom of a dragon elephant, and hit the abyss of the sea of blood, exploding with destructive power. Boom! Following a deafening explosion, the abyss of the sea of blood splashed into the sky, spewing out bloody light and demon chi that blotted out the sky. The cliffs around the abyss all crumbled, collapsing into countless fragments of earth and stone that fell into the abyss. The violent and shocking impact shook the land thousands of miles around. The mountain peak where Beiming Palace was located shook violently, and more than 10 wide cracks appeared. The majestic and dignified Beiming Palace was also shaken to the point that more than half of it collapsed. Earth and stone flew everywhere, leaving behind a pile of ruins and dilapidated walls. Many of the weaker demons were killed on the spot, and their bodies were reduced to dust. The desolate land thousands of miles in front of the mountain peak also cracked, and dust flew into the air. The power of Ji Tianqing's punch was truly terrifying. However, the sea of blood in the abyss surged for a long time, and gradually dissolved the power of the divine fist. The ancestral fiend celestial hid at the bottom of the abyss, still recovering from its injuries and recovering its strength. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's expression became more serious. I underestimated the power of the abyss of the sea of blood. The ancestral fiend celestial used it as his lair, so he must have set up a defensive divine formation. It seems that only by using the power of the heaven-mending orb can I destroy the sea of blood. Thus, Ji Tianqing activated the divine power of the heaven-mending orb, held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands, and stabbed at the abyss of the sea of blood with all his strength. Burial of heaven. Following his angry roar, endless blazing white divine light gushed out from the sword of burial of heaven. A huge divine sword that was tens of thousands of feet long descended from the sky and stabbed into the abyss. In that instant, the blazing white light illuminated the world, illuminating the surrounding thousands of miles as if it was daytime. The unparalleled divine power dispersed the bloody light and demon chi in the world, causing the surrounding thousands of miles to become clear. Boom! Another earth-shaking explosion erupted, resounding through the universe. Torrential waves of blood gushed out from the abyss, forming a huge barrier to protect the abyss. However, the huge divine sword instantly pierced through the dark red waves of blood, stabbing into the bottom of the abyss. A divine power that could destroy everything exploded in the abyss, immediately destroying the entire abyss. The ground within a radius of 5,000 miles cracked open, collapsing and collapsing. The huge abyss also became a huge pit, with endless bloody water gushing out and sprinkling on the ground. However, even more of the bloody water was purified and evaporated when it came into contact with the divine white light. In just a short moment, the abyss of the sea of blood was completely destroyed. The abyss was originally hundreds of miles deep, filled with dark red blood water. Now, the abyss had collapsed, filled with endless dust and shattered rocks, turning into a huge pit that was dozens of miles deep. 80% of the bloody water had been dispersed, turning into a dried-up mud pit. Furthermore, the ancestral fiend celestial was also injured by the divine sword light, letting out a shrill cry. Roar! It roared furiously, flying out from the abyss of the sea of blood, rushing high into the sky. In the next instant, it waved its 4 huge palms, wanting to tear open the sky and escape by teleporting. Chapter 2451. From beginning to end, the ancestral fiend celestial did not care about the survival of the demon race. He only wanted to use the billions of demon race to start a war to replenish his strength and quickly return to his peak. In his opinion, as long as he could return to his peak, even if he had to sacrifice the entire demon race, it would be worth it. After all, he was an ancient great demon god who had once slaughtered hundreds of races. He had the right to rule the world. Therefore, in such a dangerous situation, he did not hesitate to abandon the demon race and only hoped that he could escape safely. Swoosh! A huge gap was torn open in the pitch-black night sky. The ancestral fiend celestial was anxious and immediately wanted to enter the gap and escape into the alternate space. However, right at this moment, Ji Tianqing once again charged over valiantly. Heaven-piercing sword. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and frantically activated the power of the heaven-mending pearl, ruthlessly thrusting out a blazing white sword that was 3,000 feet long. The dazzling sword light carried with it an unparalleled divine power that could purify all demons. This sword was about to completely kill the ancestral fiend celestial. At this critical moment, the ancestral fiend celestial was filled with shock as he violently shrunk his body. He opened the 12 black wings on his back and formed a pitch-black cold shield wall to protect his vitals. Bam! With a loud sound that shook the heavens, the huge divine sword pierced through the black shield wall and into the ancestral fiend celestial's body. The black shield wall collapsed and exploded, filling the sky with black fragments. These were the ancestral fiend celestial's wings and bones. The demon chi within had been dispersed and turned into black ashes after falling to the ground. The huge divine sword pierced right into the ancestral fiend celestial's chest, piercing through his heart. His internal organs were shattered by the sword light on the spot. The divine power turned into a blazing white light and crazily surged into his body, spreading to his 4 limbs and 3 heads. Immediately, the demon chi in the ancestral fiend celestial's body was purified by the divine white light. Its pitch-black body, which was as large as a mountain, was immediately riddled with cracks and hundreds of holes appeared on its body. From the cracks and holes, black fog and demon chi surged out and dissipated into the night sky. Even the ancestral fiend celestial's bloody mouth and eyes turned into empty holes, burning with a blazing white divine fire. Ah! It was enduring unparalleled pain, and it let out a heart-wrenching howl. It twisted its body crazily, as if it could collapse and explode at any moment. When he saw this scene, Ji Tianqing slowly put away the burial of heaven while a wisp of an icy cold light flashed in his eyes. After being struck by this sword, his internal organs will be destroyed, and his demonic body will be purified by the divine power. A generation of great ancient demon gods will also be reduced to ashes, reduced to nothingness. He was completely confident that the ancestor fiend god would not be able to survive. After all, the ancestor demon god was only at LV3 martial god realm. How could he resist the divine power of the heaven-mending pearl? Unless the ancestral fiend god could recover to the celestial deity realm or the divine lord realm. Ji Tianqing stood in the night sky, quietly looking at the ancestral demon god, waiting for it to collapse and completely disappear. But at this moment, an unexpected scene occurred. A black figure suddenly appeared from the spatial crack behind the ancestor fiend celestial. This figure was covered in a black robe, and the hands that were exposed from the sleeves were a pair of claws covered in dragon scales. The black-robed man stretched out his hands without hesitation, transforming them into a pair of giant black palms, and grabbed the ancestor fiend celestial, who was on the verge of collapse. Before the ancestor fiend celestial could react, the giant black palms brought it into the spatial crack, and it disappeared with a swoosh. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing reacted and wanted to chase after it with his sword. However, the spatial crack had already closed, and the black-robed man and the ancestor fiend celestial had disappeared. Ji Tianqing chased after it, releasing his divine sense to cover a radius of 2,000 miles, but he could not detect their auras. Even when he used a secret technique to check a few layers of alternate spaces, he could not find any trace of the black-robed man and the ancestor fiend celestial. Without a doubt, the black-robed man had already escaped with the ancestor fiend celestial. Ji Tianqing was filled with resentment. He gritted his teeth and clenched his fists so tightly that creaking sounds could be heard. Damn it! I was too careless. Indeed, when he stabbed the ancestor fiend celestial with the giant divine sword, he was certain that the ancestor fiend celestial would die. After he let down his guard, he neglected the fact that the spatial crack opened by the ancestor fiend celestial had not closed. Who would have thought that the ancestor fiend celestial would be rescued by the mysterious black-robed man just as it was about to be destroyed? Now, Ji Tianqing was filled with regret, but it was useless. After a while, he calmed down and suppressed his anger, recalling the scene from before. He clearly remembered the black-robed man's silhouette, and the pair of black claws that were exposed from his sleeves, which were covered with ice-cold black dragon scales. Who exactly is that black-robed man? Martial god Tianju is already dead, who else would come forward to save the ancestor fiend celestial? Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered for a while, gradually coming up with an answer. Could it be the great demon Saint Ling Xian? That's right, it could be him. I have not seen him since I came to North Underworld Mountain. Of course, this was only his speculation, and he needed to verify it to be sure. If it was really saved by the great demon saint, it would not be a big deal. At most, it would just live a little longer and change its burial place. Its body has already been destroyed by the light divine power, and its strength is extremely weak, on the verge of collapse. With its current strength, it is impossible to eliminate the light divine power. Sooner or later, it will be completely purified and disappear completely. With the great demon saint's strength, even if he sacrificed his life, it would be useless, and he would not be able to save the ancestor fiend celestial. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief, and his anger dissipated. At this moment, a golden light flew over from afar and landed beside him. It was martial god Taihao. His face was still as pale as paper, and his breathing was chaotic and weak. He cupped his fists and bowed to Ji Tianqing, saying, "Lord Kenshin." Ji Tianqing turned his head to look at him, sizing him up, and asked, "Taihao, how are your injuries?" Martial god Taihao smiled bitterly and shook his head, saying, "Sorry to disappoint Lord Kenshin. I thought that after cultivating a divine technique I would be able to eliminate evil. Who would have thought that I could not even block one of the ancestor fiend celestial's attacks, and my body would be corroded by the mysterious demonic power. Now, my divine foundation has been damaged, and my vitality has been greatly damaged. I am afraid that it will be difficult to get rid of that mysterious demonic energy in a short period of time." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and comforted him, "You don't have to blame yourself. The ancestor fiend celestial is an ancient great demon god, who had reached the peak of the divine path and slaughtered hundreds of races. The divine ability that hit you was its ultimate technique, the power of 3 calamities and 9 disasters. Not to mention you, any other martial god would not be able to block or resolve it." Martial god Taihao finally understood, and nodded with a serious expression, saying, "I see. Then, wouldn't I?" Chapter 2452. At first, martial god Taihao was in despair, his eyes dim. But when he heard Ji Tianqing's words, his spirits were lifted, and his eyes brightened. The fire of hope reignited in his heart. He hurriedly bowed to Ji Tianqing and thanked him sincerely. "Lord Kenshin, you are indeed the nemesis of the demon race. You have mastered the legendary divine power of light. Taihao is extremely grateful that you are willing to save me. Taihao will never forget your kindness." Ji Tianqing nodded and ordered, "Although the ancestor fiend god has been rescued by a mysterious person, he has been severely injured by me and will not live for long. Now that the demon race is in a state of disunity, it is the best time to annihilate them. Go back to the vast divine kingdom and command the soldiers to launch a counterattack. I also need to destroy the demon race in North Underworld Mountain. After this is over, I will return to the vast divine kingdom to find you and help you get rid of the power of calamity." Martial god Taihao's expression became even more agitated. He was both excited and in disbelief. Even his lips were trembling. He took a deep breath and suppressed his emotions. He cupped his hands to Ji Tianqing and said, "As Lord Kenshin has instructed, Taihao will return to the vast divine kingdom to take charge of the situation." Then, he bid farewell to Ji Tianqing and turned to fly through the night sky, rushing back to the vast divine kingdom. Ji Tianqing looked at the half-collapsed and ruined North Underworld palace. Cold killing intent flashed in his eyes as he once again drew the sword of burial of heaven. Inside and outside North Underworld palace, thousands of demon race guards and elite experts were fleeing in panic. The news of the ancestor fiend god's death was spreading at an extremely fast speed. Transmission jade slips rose into the air near North Underworld Palace. This news was being passed on to the various demon race tribes. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Ji Tianqing swung his divine sword, sending out dazzling golden sword lights that covered the sky and scattered around Orth Underworld Palace. With a loud rumbling sound, the 2,000-meter-tall mountain peak was razed to the ground on the spot, turning into endless dust. The thousands of guards and elites of the demon race were also smashed to pieces by the sword light. Ji Tianqing turned around and left. Wielding his sword, he charged towards the demon race's holy city 1,000 miles away. In the newly built holy city, there were still over 1 million demons living there. Meanwhile, in the depths of dark North Mountain, in the Ghost Desert. The vast and gloomy Ghost Desert was one of the forbidden areas of the demon race, and there were no signs of human habitation for many years. Even the experts of the Devil Clan and the Tribulation Passing Stage rarely entered this place. Shwa! Suddenly, a crack appeared in the dark sky. A black-robed figure with a height of more than 10 feet appeared. He looked around in the sky for a while. Seeing that the surroundings were quiet and there was nothing out of the ordinary, he let out a sigh of relief. Then, he waved his hands and grabbed at the crack in the void, pulling out a pitch-black beast the size of a mountain. This pitch-black beast was 3,000 feet tall and had a ferocious and terrifying appearance. It had 3 huge heads. However, the pitch-black giant beast's entire body was covered in cracks. Its mouth, nose, and 6 eyes had all become hollow, and they were currently releasing blazing white divine flames. Without a doubt, this was the ancestor fiend god. It was still suffering from the corrosion of the divine light power. The demonic energy that it had cultivated all its life had been purified and dispersed, and its heavenly demon body was also on the verge of collapse. The black-robed man carried it and descended from the sky into the desert. When they landed, there was a loud bang, and the ground within 100 miles shook. When the ancestor fiend god landed, its body bent over and it knelt on the ground. It rolled around in incomparable pain and let out a muffled howl. More and more cracks and holes appeared on its body, and intense white light rose up. It was getting closer and closer to death. Seeing this, the black-robed man waved his claw and tore off his large cloak. He urged anxiously, "Ancestor, calm down. You must hold on. This subordinate has already brought you out of Dark North Palace and escaped to the Ghost Desert. Don't worry, Ji Tianqing will definitely not catch up to us in the short term." The ancestor fiend god was still in extreme pain, and its entire body was trembling and twitching. However, it no longer rolled around. It lay weakly in the desert and said in a muffled and hoarse voice, "Ling Xian. This god did not misjudge you. Although you are not a pure-blooded demon and are not considered a descendant of this god, you have always been loyal and loyal. But you've always been loyal, even more so than the other descendants. You've done well." Without a doubt, the black-robed man was the great fiend god Saint Ling Xian. Receiving the ancestor fiend god's praise, he revealed a proud expression. He hurriedly bowed and said in a sincere tone, "To receive the ancestor's praise is Ling Xian's greatest honor. Don't worry, ancestor, Ling Xian will definitely heal your injuries and return to your peak. Although we have been defeated for now, as long as we lay low and slowly scheme, we will be able to take revenge sooner or later." Although this was what he said, a cold light was hidden in the depths of Ling Xian's eyes. The ancestor fiend god lay in the desert and twitched a few times before saying in a low voice, "Very good. Ling Xian, this god will always remember your loyalty. If there is a chance in the future, this god will definitely set up a monument for you and let the demons worship you forever." As it said that, the ancestor fiend god quietly extended its huge claw that was full of cracks and held Ling Xian in its palm. Ling Xian heard its strange tone and saw its strange actions, and immediately realized that something was wrong. "Ancestor! What are you? What are you doing?" He. The ancestor fiend god laughed weakly and said in a low voice, "Ling Xian, aren't you absolutely loyal to this god? To help this god heal my injuries and return to my peak, aren't you willing to give up everything?" Now, it is time for you to fulfill your promise and contribute to this god. The ancestor fiend god's voice was very strange and contained a strong bewitching power that could suppress Ling Xian's soul and will. As it said that, it grabbed Ling Xian tightly with its two huge claws, causing him to be unable to move. At the same time, it released a strong demonic power to steal Ling Xian's magic power and blood energy to replenish its own body and resist the corrosion of the light divine power. Although the light divine power was very strong and could not be dissolved by its own strength. But it could stall for time and linger on for a while. And it knew that the light divine power in its body was limited and not endless, and could not be regenerated. If he had enough magic power, blood energy, and soul essence, he would be able to completely exhaust his light divine energy. At that time, he would be able to recover from his injuries. Ah! Ling Xian's expression changed and revealed a look of disbelief. He exclaimed, "Ancestor, you want to sacrifice Ling Xian to dissolve the light divine power? No. You can't do this. Ling Xian is so loyal to you and is your most trusted subordinate, how can you do this to me?" As he spoke, Ling Xian's expression was one of fear and shock, as if he could not believe it. But his eyes were cold and there was even a sneer in his eyes. The ancestor fiend god was only focused on absorbing his energy and did not realize that something was wrong. "Ling Xian, this god is giving you the chance to fulfill your promise and sacrifice yourself." Chapter 24:53. The ancestral fiend god no longer concealed his intentions. After absorbing great fiend god Saint Ling Xian's blood and energy, his pain was greatly reduced. This allowed him to see the hope of clearing the light divine power and recovering from his injuries. He was like a drowning person who had grabbed onto a life-saving straw and was unwilling to give up. Ling Xian's expression and reaction also changed. He was no longer as fearful and panicked as before. His eyes were still calm and his lips curled into a cold smile. He silently activated a divine weapon hidden in his body to resist the ancestral fiend god's devouring. At the same time, he looked coldly at the ancestral fiend god and asked coldly, "Ancestor, you are indeed an ancient fiend god. You are heartless and cruel to the extreme. I am your most loyal right-hand man. For the promise you made back then, I worked hard for you without complaint, and worked my heart out for you. And the result? Not only did you not fulfill your promise to help me break through to the deity realm, you even wanted to sacrifice my life to help you recover from your injuries. Is this how you treat your subordinates and your people? Then it is no wonder that in ancient times, you were betrayed by everyone and turned into ashes." Hearing this, the ancestral fiend god's body shook. He glared at Ling Xian, his 6 eyes spewing white divine flames. He shouted, "Ling Xian! You treacherous beast, how dare you speak to me like this? Treacherous?" Ling Xian's lips curled into a self-mocking sneer. He suddenly raised his head and laughed. "Ha ha ha! I treated you wholeheartedly and used the power of North Underworld Mountain to help you recover to the deity realm. But in the end, I became a treacherous person. You! Do you know what I regret the most now?" The ancestral fiend god urged his divine power and desperately absorbed his blood and energy. He shouted, "What?" Ling Xian's eyes were filled with hatred. He said in a vicious and gloomy tone, "What I regret the most is accepting you into North Underworld Mountain and serving you like an ancestor. I have thought countless times that when you were in such a sorry state and weak state, I should have gathered my courage and hardened my heart to refine you. If I had refined your divine soul and obtained your memories, I would be the one who has become a god. I will definitely not be as selfish as you. I will definitely lead Dark North Mountain to develop and eventually conquer the entire world." At first, Ling Xian's voice was very low, but towards the end, his emotions became more and more agitated, even becoming impassioned. The ancestral devil god was silent for a moment before he gradually stopped absorbing Ling Xian's blood energy. He laughed coldly with a hoarse voice, "Ling Xian, these thoughts have been hidden in your heart for a long time, haven't they? That's right. Ling Xian admitted without hesitation. Since they had already shed all pretenses of cordiality, there was no need to hide anything. He looked at the ancestor demonic god coldly and bellowed with disdain. I once thought that the great demonic god who had slaughtered hundreds of races and almost destroyed the entire world was an insufferably arrogant giant demon, an invincible peerless expert, with a domineering aura and wisdom that looked down upon the world. Therefore, I chose to recognize you as my master, welcomed you into the North Underworld Mountain, and made you the progenitor of my race. But I never expected that you would actually be so short-sighted, selfish, and cold-blooded and merciless to the extreme. In order to quickly recover your strength, you hurriedly launched a war and sent millions of warriors to attack the Luo River God Nation. Even when my race was defeated and millions of warriors died on the battlefield, you remained indifferent. Because you obtained the blood energy and souls of millions of living beings. From then on, I harbored resentment and disappointment towards you. Ling Xian's tone was filled with grief and indignation. There was no hysteria in his expression, but his eyes were filled with contempt and hatred. The ancestor demonic god did not bother to refute. He listened silently and quietly resisted the erosion of the light divine fire. Ling Xian laughed self-mockingly and continued, finally, when you broke through to the god realm and reappeared the prowess of a demonic god, we had reached the end of the line. Finally, we could stand up straight and raise our heads to regain our prestige. But from the start, you were just an armchair strategist, arrogant and conceited, and did not place the experts in the world in your eyes. When General Dragon's subduing demon came, you negotiated with him twice, but both times ended in failure. Even when General Dragon's subduing demon humiliated you, you could only endure it and did not even have the courage to fight him. What right does such a useless and cowardly trash have to boast about yourself? What right do you have to lead the demonic race and call yourself our ancestor? Ling Xian questioned sternly. His words were very intense, and he completely humiliated the ancestor demonic god. The ancestor demonic god was naturally furious, but he did not lose control of his emotions. He stared at Ling Xian, and his aura was extremely cold. He asked in a low voice, so, from then on, you decided to betray me and rely on General Dragon's subduing demon? You escorted me here today, was it also premeditated? Even the divine weapon in your body was given to you by General Dragon's subduing demon, right? Ling Xian was stunned for a moment before he took out a pitch-black, palm-sized metal awl from his body. At first glance, this bare and ordinary divine artifact looked like a black spinning top. Ling Xian held the black spinning top in his left hand and nodded. That's right. This is the boundless divine stone that General Dragon's subduing demon gave me as one of the bargaining chips for our cooperation. Other than that, General Dragon's subduing demon has already promised me that he will give all the continents other than Shenwu continent to my race. Together with General Dragon's subduing demon, I will divide this 5 elements world. In the distant future, General Dragon's subduing demon will even help me leave this world and conquer the vast universe. As Ling Xian spoke, his tone was confident, and his face was full of smiles. His eyes were filled with anticipation and longing. The ancestor demonic god sneered in disdain. His voice became louder and louder, and his laughter became more and more contemptuous. He. Ha 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 ha. Ling Xian frowned and glared at him. He shouted, "What are you laughing at?" The ancestor demonic god's laughter gradually stopped, and he said in a contemptuous tone, "Of course, I'm laughing at the two of you. Two fools colluding with each other. A weak and inexperienced void god who has never even come into contact with the higher realms dares to talk about conquering the universe. Yet, there's also a despicable ant who betrays his master and believes in that fool's words. He's still dreaming." Ling Xian was a little angry from the humiliation, and he shouted, "So what? At least he's 10 times better than you, a failed and selfish demon." He. The ancestor demonic god's voice was weak, and he sneered weakly. Ling Xian, you're the short-sighted ant. This god's time is too short. In just a short 8 years, I've recovered to the deity realm, which is already shocking. If you give me another 8 years, I can even give you this world. Not to mention breaking through to the deity realm, even helping you become a godlord wouldn't be difficult for me. Without waiting for the ancestor demonic god to finish speaking, Ling Xian sneered. Hee, it's a pity that you're unlucky to have met Ji Tianqing, who has also reincarnated. You're restricted by him in every aspect, and you're inferior to him in every aspect. That's why you're in such a situation. The heavens want you dead. Chapter 24:54. Ling Xian's words struck the ancestor Fiend Celestial's heart. The ancestor Fiend Celestial, who was originally calm, was so angry that he almost went berserk. Bastard! Ling Xian, you evil creature! You and Ji Tianqing are the same, evil creatures that deserve to be punished. Death is not enough. Seeing him so angry, Ling Xian laughed proudly, ha 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 ha. Did I poke your sore spot? This is the greatest sorrow of your life. A dignified ancient great fiend celestial, a peerless death god that ruled the world, was actually suppressed by a junior. This is a great humiliation. But don't worry, after I absorb your power and refine your soul, I will kill Ji Tianqing for you. Furthermore, I will lead the fiend celestial to prosperity, rule the world, and make the fiend celestial worship me as their ancestor. I will create the glory that you have not created. I will fulfill your unfulfilled wish for you. As he spoke, Ling Xian released a vast amount of magic power and injected it into the boundless divine stone in his left hand. Swoosh! The boundless divine stone released a layer of black light, protecting his entire body. Furthermore, the boundless divine stone turned into a black whirlpool, and started to devour the ancestor Fiend Celestial's divine power. The ancestor Fiend Celestial was immediately on guard, and cursed angrily, Ling Xian. You despicable and shameless bastard, you have wasted this god's nurturing and high regard for you. Ha ha ha, nurturing and high regard. Ling Xian activated the boundless divine stone's power as he sneered, you wanted to kill me just now, what right do you have to call me despicable now? I have only learned your ruthlessness, and am wiser than you. I am the winner who has the last laugh. As the ancestor Fiend Celestial's divine power was extracted by the boundless divine stone, it was transferred into Ling Xian's body. Ling Xian became more energetic, and his entire body emitted a bloody light. And the ancestor Fiend Celestial's power was rapidly weakening, and could no longer resist the corrosion of the light divine power. Its Fiend Celestial body was collapsing at an accelerated rate, turning into a large pile of black ash. The surging light divine fire spewed out from the holes and cracks all over its body, illuminating half the sky. The ancestor fiend god struggled with all his might as he roared furiously, desperately trying to break free from the suppression and devouring of the realmless divine stone. However, it had long been weakened to the extreme and was unable to break free from the power of the realmless divine stone at all. In its grief, indignation, and despair, it laughed sinisterly with a heart full of resentment, he. Ling Xian, you truly are the most sinister and despicable devil under this god. I never thought that I would die in your hands in the end. But don't be too smug. This god will never lose. Even if I turn into ashes, I will never let you have your way. You are so short-sighted, despicable, and stupid. You will soon go to the Yellow Springs and continue to be my slave. After saying that, the ancestor Fiend Celestial completely gave up resisting. It desperately resisted the devouring power of the unbounded divine stone, but allowed the light divine fire to burn its divine power and devil body, drowning its divine soul. Shwa! Blazing white divine flames of light gushed out of its body, rising fiercely and drowning Ling Xian like a sea of fire. Its body quickly crumbled and turned into black ash, and its soul gradually shattered as well. Ling Xian was instantly shocked and revealed an extremely anxious expression. He hysterically cursed, "Bastard! You idiot, you would rather die than let me take advantage of you." The black light released by the realmless divine stone firmly protected him, resisting the corrosion of the light divine fire. In the short term, his safety was not a concern. However, seeing the ancestor Fian Celestial's divine power and divine soul quickly dissipating in the light divine fire, his heart ached to the extreme. Originally, those things belonged to him. But now that things had come to this, all he could do was try his best to snatch the divine power and divine soul from the light divine fire. Hiss hiss hiss. Wisps of black and red divine power, mixed with the fragments of the divine soul, separated from the ancestor Fian Celestial's body and were devoured by the realmless divine stone. The ancestor Fian Celestial's 30,000-foot-long body also crackled and burned, and soon fell apart. In just a short time, the light divine fire gradually extinguished. The ancestor Fian Celestial's body also completely dissipated. It turned into black ash and merged into the pitch-black sand, and was carried away by the cold wind. More than half of its divine soul fragments had been purified by the light divine fire, and the other half had been devoured by Ling Xian. The original spot was empty, and apart from the traces of black ash on the ground, nothing was left. The whistling cold wind swept over, causing Ling Xian's long hair and black robe to flutter. He slowly kept the realmless divine stone and stared at the ground expressionlessly. He muttered with some regret, "It's a pity that the originally perfect plan has turned out like this. I wonder if just 30% of the divine soul's memories and 20% of the divine power can help me break through to the godly state." After standing in a daze for a long time, he then put away his disappointment and regained his spirit. He took out a communication blood jade and sent a message to General Dragon Subduing. "General, the plan has been successfully completed. I will immediately enter seclusion to break through to the godly state. Soon, I will be able to fight side by side with you and divide the world." After sending the message, Ling Xian turned and flew into the sky, disappearing into the horizon. In just a short 2 hours, Ji Tianqing destroyed the holy city of the demon race. The majestic city with a radius of more than 200 miles turned into ruins filled with ravines and deep pits. In the messy ruins, broken walls, corpses, armor, and weapon fragments of the demon race could be seen everywhere. The black soil was also stained with a layer of purple by the endless demon race's blood. Without a doubt, he had killed all the demons in the holy city. His hatred for the demon race could not be washed away by all the water in the East Sea. Even if he slaughtered 10 more cities, it would not be too much. Above the ruins, Ji Tianqing stood in the sky with a cold expression. Looking down at the ground below, he muttered to himself, "There is no trace of Ling Xian in Baiming Palace and the holy city of the demon race. It seems that the black-robed man who saved the ancestor fiend god is him." The black-robed man's body shape was very similar to Ling Xian's. In addition, Ling Xian had not appeared, so Ji Tianqing was basically sure that it was him. As for General Dragon Subduing, it was not that he had not thought of him. But General Dragon Subduing's body shape was special. 2 ferocious black dragons extended from his shoulders. It was really too easy to recognize him. After a moment, Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and thought to himself, "Forget it, I will kill my way back first. Even if Ling Xian saved the ancestor fiend god and let it survive by chance, I can find another chance to completely eliminate it. Since I can kill it once, I can kill it 10 times. Therefore, Ji Tianqing flew south. Wherever they passed, as long as they encountered demon race tribes and cities, they would destroy them without exception. Killing as he traveled, he only returned to the vast divine kingdom half a month later. Martial god Taihao had already made arrangements and ordered his soldiers to counterattack with all their might, killing the demon race armies and reclaiming their lost territory. Chapter 2455. Even with martial god Taihao's strength, he was helpless against the power of the calamity. When he learned that Ji Tianqing had come to his divine kingdom, he was excited and filled with joy and anticipation. The two of them met in the main hall of the divine palace. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Ji Tianqing asked about martial god Taihao's condition. After learning that martial god Taihao's injuries had stabilized and that the calamity's power was still slowly spreading, Ji Tianqing nodded to indicate that this was in line with his expectations. Thus, the two of them entered the secret room where martial god Taihao was in seclusion and began to dispel the calamity's power. Ji Tianqing activated the Skysmend Orb's light divine power and used a special healing method to slowly purify the demonic energy in Taihao's body. Strands of the calamity's black aura were gradually dispersed by the light divine power. Martial god Taihao could clearly feel that the pain was lessening, and the pressure on his divine body was decreasing. However, this was a long process that could not be accomplished overnight. Ji Tianqing used half a month to completely remove the calamity's black aura from martial god Taihao's body. That evening, the healing process finally ended. Ji Tianqing finished his spell and left the secret room first. Martial god Taihao meditated for a while before his mental state returned to normal. He hurried to the study to express his gratitude to Ji Tianqing. After thanking him, Ji Tianqing asked Taihao about the recent situation. Taihao reported, "Lord Kenshin, ever since you heavily injured the ancestral demon god, the news quickly spread throughout Dark North Mountain and the entire Shenwu continent. Shenwu continent was shocked, and the martial arts world praised this as a miracle that would be passed down for generations to come. The demons in Dark North Mountain were like dragons without a leader, and they had long since fallen into chaos. The demon army that had invaded our country had lost their morale and retreated in a sorry state. As they retreated, our soldiers chased after them with high morale and killed more than 1 million of them. The remaining 1,000,000 or so also had disagreements and disputes, and they split up and fled like a sheet of loose sand. Our soldiers are chasing after them and wiping out the fleeing devil army. I believe that they will soon return in triumph and reclaim all the lost land." Hearing up to here, Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's good. After this battle, the demon race will have no one to use. They won't be able to stir up any more waves. Without the primogenitor demon god and the few demon sages, the North Underworld Mountain would become a fish on the chopping block." The vast divine nation was about to recover its lost territory and needed a few more years to recuperate. When the time is right, you can lead the army into the North Underworld Mountain and completely exterminate the demon race. Good. Martial god Taihao nodded his head in agreement. After he finished speaking, a hesitant look appeared on his face as he stammered. Ji Tianqing saw that his expression was strange, so he frowned and asked, "What's wrong? Is there anything else?" Martial god Taihao pursed his lips and said with a bitter smile, "Lord Kenshin, that was good news. Not long ago, I received a piece of bad news. Didn't you kill martial god Tianju? Even Yi Lushui, Qin Zheng, the first divine son and the fourth divine son died by your sword. Now, the vast divine nation is like a dragon without a head. The entire nation is wailing in grief and despair." When the divine emperors of the various empires heard the news of martial god Tianju's death, they established their own clans and took the opportunity to expand. Some divine emperors want to leave the divine nation, while others want to merge with other empires and become the new divine masters. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "Martial god Tianju's death and the divine nation's descent into chaos are within my expectations." "How is that bad news?" Martial god Taihao shook his head and explained, "If that's all, then it's not bad news. However, what's worrying is that I received news from scouts that many Heaven Punisher battleships have been spotted in the divine nation's territory. Many Heaven Punisher warriors have already entered the divine nation's territory and taken over a large number of cities and territories." Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. He said coldly, "The Heaven Punisher actually went to invade the divine nation's territory? Those despicable and shameless be****stards. I killed martial god Tianju, but they took advantage of me. Martial god Taihao was also filled with righteous indignation. He cursed angrily, that's right. Those bastards from the Heaven Punisher race are really ****. If it were any other time, I would definitely not sit by and do nothing. I would definitely send out an army to take over the divine nation's territory and not let the Heaven Punisher race succeed. However, you know the current situation. Our soldiers are busy chasing the demon race army and reclaiming the lost territory. They can't spare any time. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and comforted him with a calm expression, it's okay. Let them do it for now. Don't forget how the demon race was defeated. So what if the Heaven Punisher race has taken over a large number of territories? After I kill General Fu Long, the Heaven Punisher race will lose their leader and will quickly be defeated. That's right. Martial god Taihao was energized and said with a burning gaze, to catch bandits, first catch the leader. That's the logic. Chapter 2456. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao had always wanted to find a divine pearl to help Yunyao break through to the immortal state. Not only did he send out the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to scout for information. He also asked the 7 god princes to help and use the power of the vast divine kingdom to search for clues about the divine pearl on the continent. Helping Yunyao find the divine pearl as soon as possible became Ji Tianqing's biggest wish and most urgent task. But now, everything was easily solved. Martial god Luo Shui sent him a message saying that she had just found a divine pearl. This was definitely a pleasant surprise for Ji Tianqing. He didn't even care about entering the divine pagoda and hurriedly woke up Yunyao in the sword world. Yunyao was cultivating in seclusion in peaceful Earth City. Her injuries had already healed and her strength was slowly increasing. Hearing Ji Tianqing's call, she hurriedly flew out of the sword world. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, Yunyao appeared in the sky and stood beside Ji Tianqing. She looked around and found that they were deep in the divine ruins. The entrance to the divine pagoda was not far away. Therefore, she looked at Ji Tianqing in confusion and asked, Tianqing, why did you call me? Did you just leave the divine pagoda? Ji Tianqing shook his head. No, I just came back here and was about to enter the divine pagoda. Yunyao was even more confused. She asked, did you fly all the way back here? Why didn't you use the divine pagoda's secret key to return to the divine pagoda directly? Ji Tianqing smiled and explained, I came back from the vast divine kingdom. I wanted to check the situation along the way and exterminate some demon race remnants. I see. Yunyao finally understood his intention. She asked with concern, you already fought with the ancestor fiend god. What was the result? Ji Tianqing told Yunyao about what had happened previously, as well as the process of him severely injuring the ancestral demon god. Yunyao was very gratified when she heard that. She said expectantly, since the ancestral demon god was heavily injured by the divine sword, and its heavenly demon body was destroyed, then even if it didn't die, it would still be heavily injured. In the short term, it won't be able to stir up trouble again. Exactly. Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, the destruction of the Dark North Mountain is imminent. The demons are no longer a concern. Now, our greatest threat is the Heaven Punisher race. This matter needs to be discussed at length. There's no need to rush. Yunyao exhorted and asked, by the way, why did you wake me up just now? Ji Tianqing took Luo Shui's communication jade slip and handed it to her. He said with a smile, I was about to enter the divine tower when I received a communication jade slip. Guess who sent it? Yunyao held the communication jade slip and carefully observed it for a moment. Her body immediately shook and she asked in disbelief, this is from the Divine Master. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded, that's right. She sent me a message to tell me a piece of good news. Yunyao was very excited. She said expectantly, the Divine Master has already disappeared for a few months. During this time, there has been no news of her, and we couldn't contact her. Now, there's finally news of her. What kind of good news is it? Ji Tianqing did not keep her in suspense and said directly, Luo Shui sent a message saying that she fought a great battle with General Dragon subduing. Unfortunately, she lost and was heavily injured. Before she escaped, she ordered the last 2 Saint Emperors to surrender to the Heaven Punisher race in order to prevent the people of the Divine Nation from being slaughtered. Only then did the battle end. After that, she hid in the endless celestial sea to recuperate. 2 months ago, she finally recovered from her injuries, and when she returned to the Shinwu continent, she found that the situation had become completely chaotic. She knew that she could not change the world or kill her enemies on her own. Thus, she placed all her hopes on you. Yunyao listened attentively and finally understood the whole story. At the same time, she could vaguely guess the good news that Ji Tianqing was talking about. Ji Tianqing continued, Luo Shui did not reveal herself. She secretly rushed to the depths of the ruins of God and found a way to enter the tombs of the gods. After going through many hardships and trials, she finally obtained a divine orb in the tomb of goddess Yaoguang. Hearing this, Yunyao realized that the truth was exactly as she had guessed. She immediately revealed a look of pleasant surprise, and her eyes became even brighter. As expected. Only the Divine Master knows where the divine orb is hidden. Her divine nation has already been destroyed, and she escaped with heavy injuries, but she did not forget to search for the divine orb for me. I owe her a great debt of gratitude, so I must help her kill her enemies and subdue the territory of Luo Shui divine nation. Yunyao's gaze and tone were very resolute, and her gratitude towards Luo Shui had reached its peak. Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement and said solemnly, although the Devil race and the Heaven Punisher race are powerful, we still have the help of Tianju divine nation. But now, martial god Tianju is dead, and the ancestral demon god is half dead. Only the Heaven Punisher race has not been dealt with. As long as we work together, we can quickly kill General Fu Long and completely destroy the Heaven Punisher race. Yunyao pondered for a moment, and her heart was filled with anticipation. She then asked, Tianqing, what kind of divine orb do you think the Divine Master obtained from Goddess Yaoguang's tomb is? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a smile, how would I know? The divine orbs that you obtained before were all special powers like vast sea, star, longevity, earthly spirit, and wind and fire. As for the divine orb that Luo Shui found, it's most likely an even stronger power. Pausing for a moment, he frowned and said, speaking of which, it's strange. When I first entered the mausoleum of the gods, I also investigated Goddess Yaoguang's tomb. At that time, I sensed that there was a mysterious power hidden in the depths of the tomb, and it seemed to be related to the soul. I didn't expect that mysterious power to be a divine orb. Yunyao thought for a moment and comforted him. Back then, you were only at the primordial spirit realm, so how could you have seen the truth and secrets of Goddess Yaoguang's tomb? It's already incredible that you could sense the mysterious power hidden in the tomb. Ji Tianqing nodded thoughtfully. He laughed at himself and said, maybe I made a mistake. Yunyao smiled and said, all right, don't think too much. Let's quickly contact the Divine Master and see what she decides. Ji Tianqing pointed at the communication jade slip in her hand and said, Luo Shui said that she suffered serious injuries in order to obtain that divine orb. She's currently recuperating outside the mausoleum of the gods. Let's return to the divine pagoda first and check on Ah Ko and everyone else's situation before going to the mausoleum of the gods to find Luo Shui. Yunyao was worried about Luo Shui's injuries, and she was also concerned about the divine orb. She wanted to go find Luo Shui directly. But on second thought, she had already returned to the entrance of the divine pagoda, so how could she not go in and see everyone? Anyway, it wouldn't take much time. Thus, she followed Ji Tianqing into the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and quickly returned to the 6th level. The dark and cold distorted spacetime was as silent as ever. But Ji Tianqing's sharp senses discovered that there were wisps of flames floating in the dark space. There were dark gold, pure gold, dark red, and light purple. The mysterious flames of different colors were like thousands of threads that slowly flowed in the air. They contained incomparably powerful and astonishing divine power. Chapter 2457. Ji Tianqing strolled in the distorted spacetime. He reached out to touch the thousands of flames beside him, and the smile on his face grew wider. Yunyao also noticed something and quickly asked, "Tianqing, what's going on? Is it related to Ku?" Ji Tianqing nodded and smiled. "That's right. These thousands of mysterious flames are actually divine flames. If I'm not wrong, Ku has probably broken through to the immortal state. And these divine flames are the divine power that seeped out when she broke through to the immortal state." Yunyao was shocked and said in disbelief, "Is that so? Ku has broken through to the immortal state so quickly?" Ji Tianqing shook his head gently and said, "Actually, it's not that fast. We've been out for a few months, and she has been cultivating in seclusion here for more than 10 years. Don't forget, she has received the inheritance of the demon race's divine king, which is that mysterious fire bird. Even this Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower is completely under her control. The time she has been cultivating in seclusion here adds up to almost 100 years. It's natural for her to break through to the immortal state." Yunyao was relieved, and she looked relieved and expectant. "If that's really the case, that's great. We're about to deal with the Heaven Punisher race. Ku has broken through to the immortal state now, and we'll have another powerful helper." Ji Tianqing turned to look at her and pretended to be confused. "Hey, Ku was weaker than you before, but now she broke through to the immortal state before you. Aren't you jealous?" Yunyao rolled her eyes at him and said, "We're all on the same side. What's there to be jealous about? Besides, everyone's opportunities and luck are different. Why should we compare? Her life is already hard enough. This is heaven's compensation for her. Unlike me, I don't work very hard, but I always meet people who help me. I'm the luckiest." Hearing Yunyao's words, Ji Tianqing quickly comforted her. Yao, don't think like that. We've been through so much to get to where we are today. I know the price you've paid and the effort you've put in." As they spoke, the two of them flew into the depths of the distorted spacetime. They saw a ball of fire in front of them. When looked at from afar, it was a ball of blazing divine flames that was mixed with gold, crimson red, and light violet. The divine flame rose fiercely and danced in the air. It condensed into a vivid and lifelike divine bird pattern that was faintly discernible. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao hurriedly flew closer and saw a woman in a red dress sitting in the divine fire. It was Ji Ku. Compared to before, the Ji Ku's appearance had changed slightly. She seemed to have grown taller, her figure taller, and her face more perfect. Her temperament, in particular, had undergone a great change. Even though she was cultivating with her eyes closed, her entire body was exuding a holy aura, and an invisible pressure was being emitted from her. It was as if she was no longer that ordinary girl, but a god that stood high above the 9 heavens, looking down on all living beings. Without a doubt, Ji Ku had broken through to the divine realm. The path of the demon god that she had mastered was even more profound and unfathomable. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao didn't wake her up. They both raised their heads and looked at the divine bird pattern that was faintly discernible in the air. They saw that the crimson and gold divine bird pattern had an unusually beautiful appearance. Its feathers were gorgeous, and the feathers on its tail were even more beautiful. In the entire Shinwu continent, there was no other bird that could be compared to this divine bird pattern. Whether it was demon beasts, spirit beasts, or some divine beasts and birds, none of them were as majestic and perfect as this divine bird. Yunyao's eyes were filled with amazement. She only felt that it was unbelievable. Ji Tianqing stared at the divine bird pattern for a moment and suddenly thought of something. He immediately revealed a look of realization and couldn't help but laugh. Yunyao glanced at him and quickly asked, Tianqing, you've been to the divine realm and seen all kinds of divine beasts. You must know this divine bird, right? Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He explained, that's right. This divine bird is the legendary immortal bird, the king of birds that is as famous as the divine dragon, the phoenix. Phoenix? Yunyao was shocked and also came to a realization. She nodded and said, so the legendary immortal phoenix is so perfect and gorgeous. It seems that the divine bird that Ku saw in her dream is the phoenix. Only the phoenix can become the divine king of the demon race and live in the 33 grotto heavens. It has the divine power of the 9 transformations indestructible. At this point, Yunyao paused and asked in confusion, by the way, isn't the phoenix known as the immortal divine bird? Why did the divine king of the demon race die? Ji Tianqing spread his hands and said, how would I know? How can there be an immortal existence in the world? No matter how powerful the divine king is, it's impossible. Yunyao nodded thoughtfully. I guess only Ku can uncover this secret. At this moment, Ji Ku, who had been cultivating in seclusion, sensed their auras. She ended her cultivation and slowly opened her eyes. When she saw Ji Tianqing and Yunyao standing in front of her, she quickly stood up and greeted them in surprise. Big brother Tianqing, eldest senior sister. Why are you back? Ji Ku smiled. Her bright eyes and white teeth were indescribably beautiful. She was as warm and gentle as the spring breeze. Her divine and majestic aura also dissipated a little. She was now like Yunyao, a goddess with a noble and holy temperament. She made people feel ashamed of their inferiority and worship her. However, her nature and temperament were different from Yunyao's. Yunyao had a cold personality. She was like the bright moon in the night sky and the orchid at the top of a snowy mountain. On the other hand, Ji Ku's personality was more naive and lively. After inheriting the path of the demon god and controlling the mysterious flame, she was more enthusiastic and energetic. Ji Tianqing looked at her with relief. He reached out and touched her head. He smiled and said, we came back to see how you're doing. Ku, now that you've inherited the divine path of the Phoenix Divine King and broken through to the martial god realm, you've been reborn from the ashes. You've truly transformed. Yunyao also smiled and nodded in agreement. She said, those who haven't entered the god realm are all mortal beings and ordinary ants. Only when you enter the god realm can you jump out of this world and have a limitless future and possibilities. Ku, congratulations on entering the god realm and becoming the martial god. Ji Ku looked at Ji Tianqing and then at Yunyao. The excitement and joy hidden in her heart instantly dissipated. She pouted and said dejectedly, I didn't expect you to already know. I wanted to give you a surprise. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao not only knew that she had broken through to the god realm, but they also guessed that she had inherited the divine path of the Phoenix Divine King. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao chuckled when they saw her reaction. Ha ha ha. If we had known, we would have pretended that we didn't know anything. Ku, you've already given us a big surprise. We're all happy for you. Chapter 2458. Ji Tianqing, Yunyao, and Ji Ku chatted happily for a long time. After they calmed down from their surprise and excitement, Ji Tianqing told them their next plan. Today, we have 2 joyous events. Ku has successfully broken through to the deity realm, and Luo Shui has found a deity pearl. After we head to the cemetery of the gods and obtain the deity pearl, Yao will also be able to break through to the deity realm. When that happens, the 3 of us and Luo Shui will be 4 martial gods, which will be enough to kill General Fu Long. Once General Fu Long dies, the Heaven Punisher tribe will be defeated and will be wiped out soon. Hearing Ji Tianqing's words, Yun Yao and Ji Ke became excited as they saw a bright future ahead of them. The two of them believed that the Heaven Punisher tribe would be wiped out soon. The chaotic Shenwu continent would also be restored to peace. After that, Yun Yao and Ji Ke remained where they were and had a private conversation. Ji Tianqing flew into the depths of the distorted spacetime alone to check on He Long, Qianyu, Bai Long, and Lan Kuan. Ever since Ji Tianqing had brought them into the distorted spacetime, they had been cultivating in seclusion and working hard to increase their strength. As for the results of their cultivation, they had not let down Ji Tianqing's expectations and had all reached the sage realm. Among them, Bai Long was the strongest as he had already recovered to the 6th level martial sage realm. Furthermore, his soul had recovered by more than half and had become more solid. He Long and Qian Yu's strengths were second as they were around the 4th level martial sage realm. Only Lan Kuan's strength was weaker as it was still at the 3rd level martial sage realm. Ji Tianqing was very satisfied with this and encouraged them before leaving them with a huge amount of cultivation resources. Now that the situation in the continent is chaotic, I know that you can't stand the loneliness and don't want to be trapped here. You only want to go out and experience the storms. However, with your current strength, it will be difficult for you to help me. Thus, what you need to do is to continue cultivating until the day you break through to the deity realm. Before they left, Ji Tianqing warned them again and again. Black Dragon, Qian Yu, White Dragon, and Lan Kuan all nodded in understanding. Ji Tianqing then summoned Bai Long alone. He took out martial god Tianju's soul fragment from his spatial ring and gave it to him. White Dragon, I've already killed martial god Tianju. These are his soul fragments. You've recovered quite well. If you refine these soul fragments, your soul will be able to recover by 70 to 80%. Then, you'll be able to condense a divine body and break through to the divine realm. I believe that you will not disappoint me. The White Dragon was filled with excitement. Although the two had been delayed for half a day in the tower, only a few moments had passed in the outside world. Yun Yao summoned the glazed fire dragon, and the two climbed onto its back and sped towards the south. The two were currently at the northernmost part of the ruins of God. The cemetery of the gods was located right in the middle of the ruins of God. The two places were not far apart, and with the glazed fire dragon's speed, it would only take half a day to reach them. Many years ago, Ji Tianqing had gone to the sky-gazing platform to participate in the Divine Kingdom exchange as the #1 god disciple of the Taihao Divine Kingdom. It was on that day that he reunited with Yun Yao on the sky-gazing platform. It was also that opportunity that he defeated the geniuses of the 3 divine kingdoms and gained the favor of the old man of the ruins of God. He was lucky enough to enter the cemetery of the gods. Back then, when he explored the tomb of the goddess of Yaoguang in the cemetery of the gods, he had secretly made up his mind. One day, he would bring Yun Yao into the cemetery of the gods to explore the mysterious power in the tomb of the gods. And now, his goal was about to be realized. Unknowingly, 12 hours had passed. The night was about to dissipate, and dawn was about to arrive. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stood on the back of the glazed fire dragon and looked at the mountains and valleys in front of them, their eyes full of anticipation. At this moment, their mood was like the scene of heaven and earth. The darkness was about to be dispelled and the light was about to be ushered in. The sky-gazing platform was already in sight, and it was flickering with white light in the dark sky. Whoosh! The glazed fire dragon streaked across the sky like an aurora and arrived at the sky-gazing platform. Ji Tianqing looked down and found that the huge sky-gazing platform was empty. He released his divine sense and covered a radius of 2,000 miles to carefully check. In the end, there was no one around the sky-gazing platform, and there was no trace of Luo Shui. At this moment, a mysterious black shadow appeared in the sky in front of the glazed fire dragon. It was a tall and burly man in a black robe. His figure was a little blurry, and there was no aura fluctuation at all, as if he had merged with heaven and earth. A wide cloak covered his face, and only a pair of withered and old hands were exposed in the sleeves of the robe. Chapter 24:59. Without a doubt, the mysterious black-robed man was the emissary of the divine ruins. Why have you trespassed into the forbidden area? He stared at Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao and asked in a dignified tone. An invisible divine pressure was emitted from his body and enveloped the glazed fire dragon, Ji Tianqing, and Yun Yao. Ji Tianqing and his wife looked at the emissary of the divine ruins and calmly cupped their hands. They explained, "Greetings, emissary of the divine ruins. We have no intention of offending you. We are only here to look for someone." The emissary of the divine ruins recognized Ji Tianqing and his body shook. He asked in surprise, "It's you. A few years ago, I led you into the cemetery of the gods. At that time, you were only at the primordial soul realm. It's only been a few years, and you've already broken through to the god realm." The emissary of the divine ruins was powerful, had a mysterious background, and had experienced the vicissitudes of life, so he did not show his emotions. However, when he saw that Ji Tianqing had reached the martial god realm, he was so shocked that he lost his composure. At the same time, he was even more certain of his original guess. He had guessed Ji Tianqing's true identity. Ji Tianqing nodded at the emissary of the divine ruins and cupped his hands. "Since Senior still remembers me, then, can I ask Senior to make an exception and allow me to enter the cemetery of the gods?" The emissary of the divine ruins calmed down and said in a low and dignified tone, "Of course not. How can the rules of the divine ruins be changed?" Hearing his words, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao both frowned and looked at each other in confusion. Strange, the old man of the divine ruins guards the cemetery of the gods and refuses to make an exception. How did Luo Shui get in? The divine master must have used other methods or had some fortuitous encounter, right? After Yun Yao's reminder, Ji Tianqing remembered that Luo Shui seemed to have mentioned it in the communication jade slip. Thus, he asked the emissary of the divine ruins, "Senior, I can't wait a few decades to participate in the next divine kingdom exchange. However, I have to enter the cemetery of the gods to meet a very important person. If I'm not wrong, as long as I can defeat you, I'll be able to enter the necropolis of the gods, right?" The messenger of the divine ruins was taken aback for a moment before replying in an indifferent tone, "This is not a rule of the divine ruins. This old man will decide based on the situation. Whether or not I'll give you this opportunity is up to me." Ji Tianqing looked at him calmly and said in a firm tone, "In that case, please give me this opportunity." The emissary of the divine ruins looked at him quietly. After a moment of silence, he said in a deep voice, "Although you have once reached the peak of the divine Tao, you are still a divine Tao expert. However, you've just broken through to the deity realm and aren't my match. Don't seek your own humiliation." Ji Tianqing's expression did not change as he said confidently, "It seems that Senior doesn't know that I'm best at creating miracles." He. "You're very confident." The emissary of the divine ruins sneered. Ji Tianqing still refused to back down. He nodded and said, "That's right. With sufficient strength, why wouldn't he be confident?" The emissary of the divine ruins chuckled again and said in a low voice, "Although you're an interesting kid, this old man doesn't intend to give you a chance." Ji Tianqing cupped his hands towards him and said indifferently, "In that case, I can only offend you." It was obvious that he wanted to forcefully defeat the emissary of the divine ruins. The emissary of the divine ruins laughed loudly, "Ha ha ha ha. Kid, you're not only confident, you're also very arrogant." As he spoke, he slowly raised his palms and accumulated a vast amount of divine power in his body. He was about to release an attack that could destroy the heavens and earth. Ji Tianqing also formed a divine art as his entire body emitted a sacred golden light and an incomparably domineering aura. Under his instructions, Yun Yao retreated far away. Star-shattering fist. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing made the first move as he clenched his fists and punched towards the emissary of the divine ruins. Two mountain-sized fist shadows smashed down from the sky like meteors descending from the sky. At that moment, the dazzling starlight illuminated a radius of thousands of miles. The darkness was dispelled and the night sky became as bright as day. The emissary of the divine ruins also raised his arms. A pair of old and withered palms shot out endless divine light from his wide sleeves. Chaotic life. The colorful divine light was like a flood that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Thousands of shadows flashed through as if they were thousands of miniature versions of the people of the world. They contained the sorrow of the seven emotions and turned into a complex and powerful force. Bang! Bang! Amidst a deafening explosion, the star-shattering fist and the colorful divine light collided and exploded into light fragments that blotted out the sky. The violent and devastating shockwaves swept across a radius of thousands of miles like colorful ripples. In an instant, all the clouds in the sky around the ancient viewing platform were swept away. Even the nearby mountains and rivers were razed to the ground, causing smoke and dust to rise into the air. Yin Yao stood in the sky hundreds of miles away, circulating her energy to resist the shockwaves and was unharmed. She stared at Ji Tianqing with worry and concern in her eyes. In the first exchange, Ji Tianqing and the emissary of the divine ruins were evenly matched. No one had the upper hand. The emissary of the divine ruins was a little surprised and couldn't help but exclaim. "Kid, you're quite capable. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant. Let's try this move again." As he spoke, the emissary of the divine ruins waved his palms and drew a dozen arcs in front of him, forming an ancient seal word the size of a mountain. Heaven-suppressing seal. He actually gathered the divine power of heaven and earth in a radius of 30,000 miles and combined it with his own divine power to form an incomparably huge, suppressing word. This was an ancient divine art. It was mysterious and powerful with infinite power. As the emissary of the divine ruins pushed out his palms, the ancient seal word flashing with golden light fell from the sky toward Ji Tianqing. Suddenly, with Ji Tianqing as the center, the space within 300 miles was sealed as if it had been frozen. The sky above his head also shattered and collapsed into a pitch-black void. Ji Tianqing endured an unparalleled pressure as if the sky had collapsed and pressed down on him. However, he didn't panic in the face of danger. He formed a divine art with his left hand and punched the seal word in the sky with his right hand. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. Endless dazzling golden light condensed into a giant shadow of a dragon elephant. It let out a resounding roar and crashed into the suppressing word. Boom! There was an earth-shattering explosion that shook the clouds. In an instant, the sacred shadow of a dragon elephant turned into dazzling light and dissipated. The ancient and majestic golden seal characters were also blasted into smithereens and disintegrated. A violent and terrifying shock wave hit the two divine bodies. Ji Tianqing stood proudly in the sky without moving at all. Only his white robe fluttered in the wind. The emissary of the divine ruins trembled and was forced to take 2 steps back before he could steady himself. Such a comparison made it obvious who was superior. Ji Tianqing was actually half a level higher than him. The emissary of the divine ruins was even more shocked. He was about to use all his power and use his ultimate divine power. But at this moment, in the sky thousands of miles away, a clear and cold shout suddenly rang out. Chapter 2460. Ji Tianqing's eyes turned cold when he heard the word stop. He turned his head and looked towards the south. It was because he was extremely familiar with that cold woman's voice. The messenger of the divine ruins stopped casting and retracted his surging divine power. He turned around and looked at the person who had come. Swoosh! An icy blue stream of light flashed over from 1,000 miles away. In the blink of an eye, the icy blue stream of light arrived above the ancient viewing platform and stopped between Ji Tianqing and the messenger of the divine ruins. After the brilliance faded, a graceful and cold figure of absolute beauty appeared. It was a woman in a blue dress with a beautiful face, a cold temperament, and a dignified aura. She was like a goddess from the 9 heavens who had descended to the mortal world. She was so holy that it made people feel ashamed of their inferiority. Without a doubt, she was Luo Shui. Seeing Luo Shui appear, Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief and a gratified smile appeared in his eyes. Yun Yao, who was not far away, also hurriedly flew over and stood beside Ji Tianqing. She looked at Luo Shui with concern. Seeing that Luo Shui was safe and sound, she revealed a relieved smile. At this moment, Luo Shui bowed to the messenger of the divine ruins and said calmly, "Senior, Tianqing came to find me. He did not mean to offend you. Please forgive him." The messenger of the divine ruins glanced at Ji Tianqing and nodded slightly. "I see." Ji Tianqing gave him an apologetic smile and cupped his fists. "Senior, I offended you just now. Please forgive me." The messenger of the divine ruins did not have much of a reaction. He only said in a low voice, "You are very good." After saying that, he turned and left, his figure disappearing into the sky. After the messenger of the divine ruins left, only Luo Shui, Ji Tianqing, and Yun Yao were left on the ancient viewing platform. The atmosphere immediately eased. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were also filled with excitement and anticipation. The two of them hurriedly came to Luo Shui and greeted her. "Luo Shui, I finally found you. Divine Master, it's great that you're safe and sound." Facing their concerned and joyful gazes, Luo Shui nodded slightly and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. "I'm fine. Sorry for making you guys worry." She had always been a cold and aloof ice mountain goddess. But now, this slight smile was like the warm sun in winter, dispelling all the coldness and causing one's heart to feel warm. Ji Tianqing was stunned as he looked at Luo Shui in disbelief. He kept having the feeling that after not seeing Luo Shui for a few months, something seemed to have changed. In the past, Luo Shui was a cold and holy ice goddess. But now, it had become holy and dignified, gentle like water, and even more mysterious. Simply put, the current Luo Shui was even more perfect. This was a peerless goddess. Yun Yao was also in disbelief. She looked at Luo Shui in shock and thought to herself, what's wrong with the God Master? Could it be that the blow of the divine nation's destruction caused her to transform and make a breakthrough? Seeing that the two of them were in a daze, Luo Shui took the initiative to say, "I came late." Otherwise, Tianqing wouldn't have fought with the old man of the divine ruins. Fortunately, this misunderstanding has been resolved and it didn't lead to a big mistake. Ji Tianqing nodded and asked, "Luo Shui, you disappeared for a few months without any news. We were all very worried about you. Now that you have returned and your injuries have healed, we have to work together to take revenge on the Heaven Punisher race." At the mention of this matter, Luo Shui's smile disappeared, and her eyes became cold and determined. She nodded in agreement and said in a low voice, "That's right. The Heaven Punisher race will be destroyed sooner or later, and the dragon-subduing general must die. Only then can we be worthy of the 1 billion innocent people of the divine nation who died tragically. However, the most important thing now is Yun Yao. She has to break through to the divine realm as soon as possible." As she spoke, she stretched out her left hand from her sleeve and handed it to Yun Yao. In her palm, there was a divine pearl the size of a walnut that was shining with a dense holy white light. As the white light flickered, it emitted a sacred and vast energy fluctuation, causing Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao to be shocked. Yun Yao, in particular, stared at the divine pearl without blinking. Her eyes were filled with admiration. "This is the divine pearl of light." Luo Shui nodded slightly and explained, "That's right. This is the divine pearl I found in the divine tomb. It contains the sacred power of light. Yunyao, I will now give this divine pearl to you. Refine it as soon as possible and try to break through to the martial god realm. As she spoke, she handed the divine pearl of light to Yunyao. Yunyao held the divine pearl of light with both hands as if she had received a precious treasure. She bowed solemnly and said, "Thank you, divine master. Yunyao will refine it as soon as possible and live up to your expectations." Luo Shui pointed to the south and said, "At the foot of the mountain 3,000 miles away, I have dug a cave and set up layers of formations to use as a place for seclusion. Yunyao, I have already prepared what you need for your seclusion. You can go and refine the divine pearl now. Divine Lord, you are so considerate. Yunyao can't thank you enough." Yunyao's eyes were filled with gratitude as she bowed sincerely. Ji Tianqing was stunned and asked subconsciously, "Refine the divine pearl here? Why are you in such a hurry?" Originally, he had planned to take Yunyao back to the Jiutian Tenju Tower after obtaining the divine pearl. Not only was it safe to cultivate in seclusion in the divine tower, but it also saved time. However, he did not expect Luo Shui to make such an arrangement. Luo Shui turned to look at him when she heard his question. Her eyes were as gentle as water, and she explained in a gentle tone, "Tianqing, that divine pearl is a little special. There is a divine formation in the divine tomb that can preserve divine power and not dissipate after tens of thousands of years. However, once you leave the divine tomb, your divine power will quickly dissipate, so you cannot delay. Moreover, I have been in seclusion in that cave to heal my injuries. It is very safe. Now that my injuries have healed, it is very appropriate for me to give it to Yunyao. What do you think?" Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and could not refute, so he nodded and said, "Well, that's good too. You have considered it thoroughly." Seeing that he had dispelled his doubts, Luo Shui took him and Yunyao to the south. Swoosh! 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 The three of them flew across the sky as fast as lightning. Soon, they flew 3,000 miles and landed on the peak of a 10,000-foot tall mountain. The cave that Luo Shui had dug was deep underground at the foot of the mountain. After she opened the sealing divine formation of the cave, Yunyao brought the divine light pearl into the cave and began to refine the divine pearl without any distractions. Luo Shui closed the sealing divine formation and returned to the peak of the mountain with Ji Tianqing. The two of them stood side by side on the huge millstone at the peak of the mountain, waiting quietly. The night had finally dissipated, and the light had arrived. A new day had begun. The divine ruins, which had always been dark and cloudy, could actually see a glimmer of light in the east. Ji Tianqing quietly looked at the horizon. His mood calmed down, and he was silent as if he was deep in thought. Luo Shui stood beside him and looked at him with a gentle gaze. The corners of her mouth curled into a faint smile as she asked, "Tianqing, what are you thinking about?" Ji Tianqing stared at the sky and said without hesitation, "I am thinking that the suffering and darkness have passed, and the light is coming." Chapter 2461. When Luo Shui said this, her tone was sincere and heartfelt. In fact, there was even a smile in her clear and lively eyes, filled with anticipation. Ji Tianqing vaguely felt that her words seemed to have a deeper meaning. However, he did not ask further, wondering if he was being too sensitive. The two of them stood side by side, facing the somewhat cold morning breeze and bathing in a trace of golden dawn. After a long silence, Luo Shui took the initiative to say, "Tianqing, Yunyao's closed-door cultivation to refine the divine pearl is not something that can be done overnight. At least half a month, at most 2 to 3 months. Let's wait somewhere else." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said, "There's no need. Let's wait here." Luo Shui stopped persuading him and looked at him with a complicated expression. She whispered softly, "Tianqing, you treat Yunyao so well." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and turned to look at her. He asked, "Luo Shui, what's wrong? Why did you suddenly think of saying this? Luo Shui lowered her head without a trace and avoided his gaze, not daring to look him in the eye. The corners of her mouth curled up into a smile, and she said indifferently, "It's nothing. It's just that all these years, seeing you wholeheartedly protect Yunyao, that's all." Ji Tianqing nodded to express his understanding and explained with a smile, "She is my wife and treats me as important as her own life. She even gave birth to children for me, she treats me like this, so no matter how well I treat her, it's only right." In fact, there were many reasons and reasons other than these. However, there were some things that he would keep in his heart. It was enough that he understood and did not have to say them out loud. For example, when he was young, he was betrayed and his dantian was destroyed. He carried the title of trash and was even discussed and mocked by everyone. During the darkest period of his life, it was Yun Yao who encouraged and helped him out of his predicament and entered a martial arts sect to cultivate. Later on, the two of them experienced all kinds of hardships and dangers and were together through thick and thin, never leaving each other. And all of this, he firmly remembered in his heart and would never forget it. Of course, other than Yun Yao, there was also Ji Ku. She had also accompanied him through all the hardships and became the most important person in his life. Luo Shui nodded slightly. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, "Tianqing, other than Yun Yao, will you treat anyone else so well?" This time, Ji Tianqing did not answer her question. He turned to face Luo Shui, looking at her with a solemn expression, and asked in a low voice, "The Luo Shui I know has always been pure of heart and few desires, indifferent to fame and fortune, unaffected by the 7 emotions and 6 desires. She is like a fairy who does not eat the food of mortals, and would not care about such trivial matters." "Why?" "It's only been a few months, but I feel like you've changed." Luo Shui raised her head slightly and looked at him with clear eyes. Her gentle smile did not change. After Ji Tianqing finished speaking, she pursed her lips and thought for a moment. Then, she smiled bitterly and said, "Perhaps it's because in the past 3,000 years, Scandinavia has always been peaceful and stable. But this time, the Scandinavia that I created has been destroyed. Isn't this too big of a blow to me? In these few months, I would often be alone in a daze, and my thoughts would run wild many times." Ji Tianqing listened seriously. After a moment of silence, he comforted her, "I can understand how you feel, but don't think too much. The calamity is only temporary. Soon, we will be able to defeat the Heaven Punisher race, kill General Long Fu, take back the territory that belongs to you, and rebuild Luo Shui's Scandinavia." Luo Shui shook her head gently and said with a bitter tone, "No, actually, you can't understand how I feel." Ji Tianqing stretched out his hands and pressed on her shoulders. He looked at her with a determined gaze and said, "Of course I can understand, because my experience is 100 times heavier than yours. I fell from the peak of the divine Tao, fell at the most glorious moment, and became a nameless mortal. Such a blow and pain is far more than what you're experiencing now. Therefore, the me in this life is no longer the same as before. It's as if I'm a completely different person." Hearing his heartfelt words, Luo Shui's body shook. She slowly raised her head and looked into his eyes. She shook her head and said in a low voice, "No, you haven't changed. You're still the same as before." Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and continued to comfort her, "All right, even if my appearance haven't changed, my nature and thinking have changed. This is a different me. Therefore, I can understand how you feel, and I also know that you didn't mean to become so emotional. Don't feel pressured anymore. All of this will be over very soon." Amen. Luo Shui nodded and instinctively wanted to lean into his embrace. However, she was startled for a moment before she realized that the time was not right. She returned to her calm and cold state. Ji Tianqing saw that she had calmed down and was relieved. "Luo Shui, don't think too much. Let's just wait here for Yao Yao to come out." After saying that, Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged on the large millstone and closed his eyes to rest. Luo Shui still stood beside him and looked at him with a complicated gaze. She thought to herself, Tianqing, if I had to choose, would also be more willing to choose you in this life. After all, you're no longer as cold and unromantic as you were in the past. 1,000 years ago, you were born for the divine Tao. You were like a high and mighty, cold god. But in this life, you're flesh and blood, affectionate and righteous. You're the one who's worth entrusting your body to. Have I become sentimental? Perhaps I have. After all, I'm about to fulfill my wish and replace Yun Yao as your wife. I'll always be by your side. I'll do it flawlessly and won't reveal any flaws. I won't let you find any clues. I won't hurt you. I'll only use the rest of my life to love you. As these thoughts flashed through her mind, Luo Shui looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of affection. It was somewhat blurred. A faint smile hung on her lips as she immersed herself in her beautiful fantasy. Tianqing, there's a secret that I can't tell you for the time being. My divine soul has already changed and fused with an ancient memory. Do you know that I've already inherited the memories of Goddess Yaoguang? Now, I'm already half a Goddess Yaoguang. After Yun Yao breaks through to the God stage, I'll occupy her divine body and become the complete Goddess Yaoguang. At that time, not only will I be the reincarnation of an ancient goddess, but I'll also be Luo Shui and your wife, Yun Yao. I'll make up for all the regrets of my previous life in this life. If the two of us work together, we'll definitely be invincible. This world and this era will belong to us. Thinking of this, Luo Shui's mood also fluctuated. Her eyes were filled with joy and anticipation. This was her plan. She had been preparing for it for a long time. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao didn't notice any clues. Everything was normal and developing in the direction she had predicted. What she had to do now was wait. Chapter 2462. Time passed quietly. Unknowingly, 25 days had passed. Yun Yao had been in the secret underground chamber, refining the divine pearl with all her might. It could be said that she was completely focused. Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui had also been guarding the mountain peak, waiting quietly. During this period, nothing unusual happened. The two of them did not receive any news from the outside world, and the emissary of the divine ruins did not appear. Everything was going smoothly. Until the morning of the 26th day. When the sun rose, a wisp of dawn appeared in the eastern horizon, shining through the gray clouds and illuminating the mountain peak. Suddenly, a five-colored ray of light shot into the sky from the cave deep underground. Swoosh! The ray of light covered the sky and the sun, covering thousands of miles of heaven and earth, making this area extremely dazzling. An extremely dense divine power was emitted from the ray of light, enveloping an area of 3,000 miles. A vast and majestic divine aura also filled the world. As a result, the wind and clouds in the sky changed color, and the boundless gray clouds dissipated. The rising sun in the east sprinkled down millions of bright golden light, illuminating the heaven and earth. 7 dazzling stars had appeared in the sky. They were arranged in a special pattern and were shining brightly. Such a divine and glorious scene was breathtaking. Ji Tianqing, who was in the middle of meditating, was suddenly awakened by the sudden divine light. He immediately ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. Seeing the phenomenon in the sky clearly and feeling the divine aura coming from underground, his eyes were filled with joy. It's Yao Yao. It must be her. This is the phenomenon of heaven and earth that only appears when a martial artist breaks through to the divine realm. Yao Yao has been cultivating in seclusion for 26 days, and finally refined the divine pearl and broke through to the martial god realm. Ji Tianqing secretly clenched his fists, his spirits lifted, and his eyes flickered with excitement. Luo Shui also woke up and glanced at him with a complicated expression. Soon after, he revealed a pleasantly surprised and gratified expression and praised, "Yun Yao is indeed worthy of being called a genius. She actually used only 26 days to refine the divine pearl and successfully break through to the martial god realm. Tianxing, look, the phenomenon of heaven and earth caused by her breaking through to the divine realm is actually the Big Dipper. Among the stars in the sky, the Big Dipper is the head of the heavenly dipper and earthly fiends. It is an incomparably noble phenomenon. From this, it can be seen that Yun Yao's future achievements are limitless. She will definitely inherit Goddess Yaoguang's legacy, and her body will undergo a huge transformation, like a goddess reborn." Luo Shui deliberately pointed out these words to remind Ji Tianqing to be mentally prepared in advance. Even if Yun Yao's temperament changed in the future, it was reasonable. After all, Yaoguang's reincarnated. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "That's right. Yaoguang's. Now that he has broken through to the martial god realm, he might be able to comprehend the Yaoguang goddess's succession." Hearing this, Luo Shui felt more at ease. She raised her head to look at the divine clouds in the sky with a smile on her face. She said calmly, "Yun Yao has merged with 6 divine pearls and finally broken through to the deity realm. My wish has been achieved. From now on, we will work together to overcome all difficulties and restore peace and tranquility to the Shenwu continent." Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement. Although Yao Yao has just broken through to the martial god realm, she has inherited Goddess Yaoguang's divine Tao. Her combat power is outstanding. With our current strength, we are qualified to fight General Fu Long. After saying that, he instructed Luo Shui who was beside him, "Luo Shui, you wait here, I will go and check on Yao Yao's situation now." Before he could get up and leave, Luo Shui hurriedly dissuaded him. "No. Yun Yao has just broken through to the martial god realm, and her divine Tao foundation is not stable. She should be in seclusion to strengthen her foundation. If you go and see her now, you will definitely affect her cultivation." Ji Tianqing could only suppress his excitement and anticipation when he heard Luo Shui's advice. He nodded. "Fine, let's wait a little longer." Thus, the two suppressed their excitement and continued to wait at the mountain peak. Unknowingly, another 4 hours passed. It was noon. The 5-colored light that covered the sky had yet to dissipate. Not a single gray cloud could be seen in the sky for thousands of kilometers, and the resplendent sunlight became even more dazzling. At this moment, Ji Tianqing suddenly had a bad premonition, and a chill ran down his spine. Before he could react, 2 sword lights that were thousands of meters long suddenly appeared in the sky behind him and attacked him as fast as lightning. They were 2 dazzling sword lights that contained an unparalleled sharpness that could tear through space. They pierced toward him and Luo Shui respectively. Luo Shui finally realized that the situation was not good. She wanted to turn around and block, but it was too late. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing decisively stepped forward and swung his palms at the 2 giant swords. Heaven-shaking palm. Following his angry roar, boundless golden light spewed out from his palms and formed 2 palm shadows that were as large as mountains. Kaboom! Amidst a deafening explosion, the golden palm shadows and the 2 giant swords collided fiercely, and a destructive shockwave erupted. The golden palm shadows shattered on the spot, but the 2 dazzling sword lights did not collapse. They stabbed Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui. Boom! Boom! Following 2 muffled explosions, Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui were both sent flying. Ji Tianqing's divine body was special and had a powerful defense, so he was not injured. However, Luo Shui's protective divine light was destroyed by the sword lights, and her face turned pale as she spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing hurriedly cast a concerned gaze at her and asked via voice transmission, "Luo Shui, how are your injuries?" Luo Shui replied anxiously, "Don't worry about me. quickly stop the attacker. Don't let her destroy Yun Yao's cultivation. Ji Tianqing was relieved to see that her life was not in danger. He released his divine sense to cover the surroundings and immediately discovered the attacker. She was hiding in the sky 100 miles ahead. Therefore, he did not hesitate to draw the burial of heaven and rushed toward the attacker. At the same time, he did not forget to send a voice transmission to Luo Shui. Luo Shui, I will deal with the attacker. You must protect Yun Yao. The situation was critical and urgent, and Luo Shui did not have time to think. She nodded without hesitation and said, Okay. Don't worry, I will not let Yun Yao be hurt at all. You have to be careful too. Don't try to be brave. Ji Tianqing only responded and did not say anything. His figure flashed and rushed 100 miles away. His divine sense detected that the attacker lurking in the dark was a woman with a head full of white hair and wearing a long white dress. The white-haired woman was obviously not young, and her strength was unfathomable. She was staring at him coldly and waving her palm to send out an overwhelming number of light blades. Ji Tianqing waved his sword to block as he frowned and looked at her. He thought to himself, who is this white-haired woman? Chapter 2463. Bang! 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 A series of muffled sounds reverberated in the sky. Hundreds of golden sword lights and blazing white blades shattered into billions of fragments that scattered across the land. Ji Tianqing had used all his strength to exchange a single blow with the white-haired woman, but he had not been able to gain the upper hand. Both sides were evenly matched, and the white-haired woman had not used any divine weapons, so she had a slight advantage. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had neutralized her divine art attack, the white-haired woman was clearly startled. She then turned around and flew into the distance without hesitation. Ji Tianqing did not expect that the white-haired woman would be so decisive. He hesitated for a moment, but then he raised his divine sword and chased after her. Trying to escape? No way! With a cold shout, he strode across the sky and chased after her, covering 50 kilometers with each step. The white-haired woman's demeanor was very light and graceful. She was like a streak of white light flashing across the sky, covering hundreds of kilometers in the blink of an eye. Even though Ji Tianqing chased after her with all his might, it was very difficult for him to catch up in a short amount of time. Both parties chased after each other for about 100 breaths of time, but they were still 150 kilometers apart. Ji Tianqing was able to determine that the white-haired woman's strength was definitely above his own. In fact, it was very likely that she had reached the 6th or 7th level of the martial god realm. As he chased after the white-haired woman, he muttered in his heart and secretly speculated, a 6th or 7th stage martial god is stronger than the 3 divine masters. On the Shenwu continent, which martial god is stronger than the 3 divine masters? Moreover, she's a human martial god. Ji Tianqing racked his brains, but he could not figure out the white-haired woman's identity, nor could he understand her intentions. Finally, 7 or 8 minutes passed. Both parties chased each other for more than 20,000 kilometers before arriving in the sky above a barren mountain range. The white-haired woman seemed to be lacking in strength, and her speed gradually decreased. Ji Tianqing took advantage of this opportunity to chase after her without hesitation. Whoosh! His figure flashed, and he teleported in front of the white-haired woman, blocking her path. The white-haired woman was forced to stop, and she stood in the sky with a calm expression as she looked coldly at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing also stared at her, sizing her up from head to toe before asking, "Who are you, and why did you attack me?" The white-haired woman replied expressionlessly, "Who am I?" Ha ha ha. Is this question important? Someone is willing to pay a sky-high price for your and Luo Shui's lives. This old one is just following the rules. Hearing this answer, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and asked doubtfully, "Someone offered a sky-high price for Luo Shui's and my lives. Are you an assassin?" No. You're already a veteran martial god expert. How could you possibly become an assassin? Who in the Shinwu continent is qualified to hire you as an assassin? You're lying. The white-haired woman was stunned for a moment, as if she had not expected Ji Tianqing to have such a reaction. She frowned but didn't reveal any abnormalities. She sneered and said, "Hee hee, so what if I'm an assassin? The price the other party is offering is exactly what I need the most. Killing you and Luo Shui would be an easy matter, so why not? Kid, cut the crap. This old one will take your life right now." As her voice fell, the white-haired woman waved her wide sleeves and raised her palms to slap Ji Tianqing. Swish. 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 Ji Tianqing didn't dare to slack off. He hurriedly waved the Burial of Heaven and used his ultimate sword technique to launch a counterattack. 7-star sword. The Burial of Heaven stabbed forward, and 49 starry sword lights shot out, piercing toward the 5-colored divine light with endless divine power. Boom! 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 The giant sword and the divine light collided, and a deafening explosion echoed in the sky. The sword lights and the divine light collapsed at the same time, turning into a 5-colored shockwave that spread out in all directions, covering a radius of 2,000 miles. The violent force instantly raised 2,000 miles of mountains and rivers to the ground. Ji Tianqing and the white-haired woman were both forced to retreat more than 100 miles, panting violently. Neither side gained the upper hand. The white-haired woman shouted coldly with a gloomy face and swung her palm again. Ji Tianqing didn't hesitate either. His left hand formed a sword technique, and his right hand held the Burial of Heaven as he charged forward. The two sides fought high in the sky, using their ultimate techniques with all their might. The sky fell and the earth cracked, and the sun and moon lost their light. A loud rumbling sound reverberated in the sky. The violent shockwave spread in all directions, dispersing the gray clouds in the sky and flattening the mountains on the ground. The two figures flickered high in the sky, changing positions from time to time, constantly changing the battlefield. However, neither side could do anything to the other in the short term. At the same time, Luo Shui, who was injured by the white-haired woman, had already recovered. She was supposed to stay on the mountain peak, guarding Yun Yao in the underground cave. However, she looked to the east with a complicated gaze and muttered to herself, "Master, with your strength and means, it shouldn't be a problem for you to stall Tianqing for an hour. I just hope you don't forget to not hurt Tianqing." After muttering to herself, she suppressed the complicated thoughts in her heart and walked down the mountain peak. Swoosh! She landed at the foot of the mountain and entered the ground in a flash. After traveling for 50 miles underground, she finally arrived at the entrance of a cave in the depths of the earth. There were 2 layers of ceiling divine formations in front of her. These were the divine formations that she had set up personally, so she was very familiar with them. She waved her palm and released a few beams of divine light to activate the divine formations. When the divine formations cracked open a door that was more than 10 feet tall, she stepped through the divine formations and entered the cave. In the spacious cave, the light was dim and it was silent. Only the gems embedded in the cave walls shone with a faint white light. Luo Shui walked expressionlessly, crossed a long tunnel, and came to the middle of the cave. 100 steps in front of her, there was a high platform made of jade. More than 10 types of mysterious divine formations were set up on it. At the top of the high platform sat a beautiful woman in a white dress. She was pure and holy. She was Yun Yao. Yun Yao had just broken through to the immortal state. Her entire body was surrounded by 5-colored divine light. She was focused on cultivating. Just as Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui had guessed, after breaking through to the immortal state, she had indeed undergone an obvious transformation. Not only had her temperament become colder and more noble, but her aura had also become more powerful and holy. She was like a goddess who had descended to the mortal world. Luo Shui stepped onto the high platform and stood in front of Yunyao. She looked down at Yunyao with a complicated gaze. She murmured in a low voice, "Yunyao, your mission has been completed. It's time for you to rest." Yunyao, who was cultivating, suddenly heard Luo Shui's voice and was immediately awakened. She quickly ended her cultivation and opened her eyes to look at Luo Shui. She said joyfully, "Divine Master, why are you here? Yunyao has not let you down. She has finally refined the divine pearl and broken through to the martial god realm." Obviously, the pure and kind Yunyao did not expect danger to befall her. Luo Shui looked at her calmly and nodded. "You have done well. Now, I will open the divine formation to help you cultivate. I will teach you a few divine abilities and supreme techniques to help you stabilize your divine foundation as soon as possible." Chapter 2464. Yunyao didn't doubt Luo Shui's words at all. Furthermore, she had always believed in Luo Shui and respected him very much. She even thanked Luo Shui gratefully when she heard that he was going to teach her a divine ability. "Thank you for your help, Divine Master." Yunyao is very grateful. Then, she followed Luo Shui's instructions and slowly closed her eyes. She opened her heart and waited. Luo Shui looked at her deeply. After hesitating for a moment, he cast a spell to activate the divine array on the platform. Swoosh! 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 Suddenly, the dozens of divine arrays on the platform were activated and released hundreds of five-colored divine lights. Those hundreds of five-colored divine lights were like densely packed ropes that extended to the top of the platform and trapped Yunyao. In the blink of an eye, Yunyao was bound by hundreds of divine lights, and her divine body and power were sealed. A majestic suppressive force descended and firmly suppressed her on the platform. She couldn't move at all. Only then did Yunyao realize that something was wrong. She opened her eyes and looked at Luo Shui. Puzzled, she asked, "Divine Master, what are you doing?" She could clearly feel that she was sealed by dozens of divine arrays and had become a puppet that could be slaughtered at any time. This didn't seem like a divine array that assisted in cultivation, and it didn't seem like a divine ability that was going to be taught. Even so, she didn't think of the worst. She only felt that it was strange. Luo Shui looked at her calmly. He no longer hid his thoughts and revealed his true colors. "Yao Yao, ask yourself honestly. How have I treated you all these years?" Yunyao was stunned and nodded subconsciously. "Divine Master, you treat me like your own child. Naturally, you care for me and dote on me. However, Divine Master, why are you suddenly asking this?" Luo Shui nodded slightly and smiled. "I also know that you have always been loyal to me. Now, you have seen that I have lost the Luo Shui God Nation. I have nothing left. If I want to take revenge and take back everything that belongs to me, are you willing to sacrifice yourself for me?" Yunyao felt even more strange. Seeing that Luo Shui's condition was a little strange, she couldn't help but frown. "Divine Master, what's wrong? Did something happen to him? Can you remove the seal first? Where's Qianqing? Where is he?" Luo Shui ignored her question and continued, "I believe you already knew that when you were born, you were a dead baby. You were already dead 30 years ago. It was I who sent the patriarch to find you and implant the Neptunian divine pearl into your body, which saved your life. Therefore, I am your second parent, giving you this happy life." Yunyao looked at her with sparkling eyes and said in a serious tone, "Yunyao understands what the Divine Lord said. That's why Yunyao respects you so much. Moreover, Yunyao has been working hard on her cultivation to break through to the divine realm as soon as possible so that she can help you take revenge and take back the kingdom of God. No matter how hard it was, how many storms and dangers she had to go through, Yunyao would never back down. However, I would like to know, why did you suddenly say all these things today?" Luo Shui smiled and said in a low voice, "It's very simple. I helped you defy the heavens and change your fate, allowing you to live for 30 more years and enjoy family and love. If you can become his wife and bear his child, your life will be complete. Next, you should return to your original fate and disappear quietly." Yun Yao's pupils constricted when she heard that. Disbelief filled her face. She looked at Luo Shui in disbelief. After a long silence, she asked in a low voice, You want to kill me?" Luo Shui shook her head gently and explained, "No, I don't want to kill you. I just want to take back what belongs to me." "What belongs to you?" Yun Yao frowned and shook her head gently. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this? I respect you very much. Tianqing sees you as a close friend. I've already broken through to the divine realm. Soon, we can fight side by side, destroy the heaven-punishing race, and take back the Luo Shui kingdom of God. We're about to take revenge. Why have you become so unfamiliar?" "Unfamiliar?" Luo Shui raised her eyebrows and smiled gently. "No, it's not that I've become unfamiliar. It's just that you've never understood me. Ha ha ha. I don't have much time, so I won't talk nonsense with you. Before Tianqing returns, I have to complete the plan and completely replace you." As she spoke, Luo Shui slowly raised her palms and began to cast a spell. A white divine soul light enveloped Yun Yao. Yun Yao's eyes turned cold. She asked in disbelief, "Before Tianqing returns? Completely replace me? Did you use some trick to send Tianqing away? You want to destroy my divine soul and take over my body?" Luo Shui nodded slightly, his expression calm as he said, "You are indeed worthy of being the person that I have chosen. You are truly talented and intelligent, with an intelligence that surpasses others. In such a short time, you could guess the truth with just a few words from me." "That's right. Tianqing has already been lured away. He won't be back for an hour. I'll take over your body and replace you as Yun Yao. I'll be his wife and accompany him for the rest of his life." Luo Shui sat cross-legged in front of her. She smiled and said gently, "Don't worry, I won't hurt the 2 children in your womb. Because they'll be my children from now on. I won't hurt Tianqing either because he'll be my husband. I'll love him more than you. As the reincarnation of the goddess of Jade Light, I'll help him return to his peak and take revenge." At this point, Yun Yao completely understood Luo Shui's plan and intentions. Her body stiffened and her eyes widened as she stared at Luo Shui. Her eyes were filled with shock and despair. After a long time, she regained her senses and shook her head in disbelief. "You! How can you be so despicable? You're the noble, holy, and kind martial god Luo Shui. How can you do such a despicable thing? I respected you so much and Tianqing treated you as his best friend. How can you treat us like this?" Luo Shui frowned and shook her head. "No, this isn't despicable. It's a plan I made 30 years ago. Originally, I saved your life to nurture you as a substitute. After you fused with a few divine pearls, you'd be able to form the divine body of the goddess of Jade Light. After I refined the memories of the goddess of Jade Light and took over your body, I'd be able to become the reincarnation of the goddess of Jade Light. But I didn't expect that you'd bring me such a huge surprise. The sword god has actually been reborn and has become your husband. So, I could only take your place. Not only could I complete the plan, I could also fulfill the long-cherished wish of my previous life. You're my shadow. Regardless of appearance, figure, or temperament, they're all very similar. Tianqing loves you deeply and married you. This proves that he already loved me. But in his previous life, he was obsessed with the way of the sword and didn't understand romance. Chapter 2465. Luo Shui spoke in a calm tone. There was not a trace of anger or hatred in her voice. Her expression and eyes were very calm. These were all her heartfelt words. She had already thought it through and believed it was the truth. She did not think that this was a mistake, and she did not feel sorry for Yun Yao. But in Yun Yao's eyes, the current Luo Shui was so unfamiliar. She looked at Luo Shui with a burning gaze and shook her head gently. It's hard to believe that you would say these words yourself. I never thought that your true thoughts would be like this. No wonder you used to care and take care of me so much in the past. Sure enough, there is no love without a reason in this world. There is always a purpose and a conspiracy. Luo Shui nodded slightly and sighed faintly. All right, I've said what needs to be said. You also understand the reason. You can go with peace of mind. As her voice fell, she slowly stretched out her palms and released a dense white light of divine soul into Yun Yao's body. She wanted to refine Yun Yao's divine soul and seize all of Yun Yao's memories. In this way, after she took over Yun Yao's body, she would not reveal any flaws and would not let Ji Tianqing see any clues. Swoosh! Swoosh! 2 streaks of dense white light, like 2 tentacles, reached into Yun Yao's mind and swept towards her divine soul. In the next moment, Yun Yao's divine soul would be disintegrated. However, Yun Yao was sealed by a powerful divine array and could not move or resist at all. At this moment of imminent peril, something unexpected happened. 2 different divine soul powers suddenly flew out of Yun Yao's stomach and entered her mind, firmly wrapping around her divine soul. Moreover, 2 divine soul voices, one male and one female, were transmitted into Luo Shui's mind. You bad woman! Stop it! Don't hurt mother! The first to sound was a clear and pleasant girl's voice. Her tone was filled with anger and worry. Then, another boy's voice sounded. If you want to harm mother, then kill us first. Although this voice was very young, like a 3-year-old child, the tone was very firm and brave. Without a doubt, the 2 souls that had suddenly appeared were Yaya and Chen Chen. The 2 of them were fearless and resolutely protected Yun Yao's soul. Such an unforeseen event caused Luo Shui to hurriedly withdraw his hand and frown fiercely. She stared at Yun Yao's abdomen with a face full of surprise. She couldn't help but exclaim, are those, the voices of the 2 children's souls? They hadn't even been born yet, but their souls were already so powerful. How is this possible? Although Luo Shui had long known that Yun Yao had been pregnant for many years, she had never given birth to 2 children. Those 2 children were so extraordinary. In the future, they would definitely be world-shaking peerless geniuses. However, Luo Shui had never expected that the 2 children would already possess powerful souls and extraordinary strength while they were still in the womb. Furthermore, the 2 children had independent and complete thoughts, no different from normal people. This was too shocking. For a moment, Luo Shui's body stiffened as he stood there, hesitating and weighing his options. The 2 white lights of the souls that she had released also stopped in Yun Yao's mind. She didn't know whether to advance or retreat. At this moment, Yaya used the voice of the soul to say, Mother, don't be afraid. Yaya and brother will protect you. Chen Chen confronted Luo Shui and said in a calm and serious tone, Martial God Luo Shui, father and mother both regard you as the most trusted person. I didn't expect you to do such a thing. If you insist on doing things your own way, then kill me and Yaya first. We will live and die together with mother. However, I must remind you that even if you have taken over mother's body, Yaya and I are already dead. Father will definitely find out. With father's intelligence and wisdom, he will quickly figure out your scheme and understand the truth. At that time, no matter how you quibble and cover up, it will be useless. Father will definitely break off relations with you and kill you to avenge the 3 of us. Chinchin's words were clear and orderly. Her tone was low and dignified, and it actually had some soul-shaking power. While Luo Shui was greatly surprised, her expression also became more and more unsightly. Her face became gloomy, and her brows furrowed tightly together. A hint of hesitation flashed in her eyes. She had to admit that what Chen Chen said was very reasonable. Either she stopped and gave up, or she would be the villain to the end. However, things had already come to this point. She had already told Yun Yao her plan and conspiracy. How could she give up? If she insisted on doing things her own way and killed Chen Chen and Yaya first, and then refined Yun Yao's soul, then she wouldn't be able to explain it to Ji Tianqing in the future. Therefore, Chen Chen and Yaya absolutely couldn't be killed. Even if she used a secret technique to knock the two children unconscious and then took over Yun Yao's body, it was still impossible. After all, the two children already knew the truth. Once they told Ji Tianqing the truth, this matter would still be exposed. In any case, this matter wouldn't work no matter what. Luo Shui immediately fell into a dilemma. She stared at Yun Yao in a daze, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Her hand stopped in the air and trembled slightly. She was struggling fiercely in her heart. This was because after thinking about it, she realized that there was only one solution to this matter. It's already impossible to hide from the two children and replace Yun Yao as Tianqing's wife. If I kill the two children and take over Yun Yao's body, I won't be able to hide it from Tianqing, and it will soon be exposed. The only thing I can do now is to give up on Tianqing and sacrifice the two children and Yun Yao. That way, I will become the reincarnation of goddess Yaoguang and become enemies with Tianqing. We will never be able to reconcile. When she thought of this, Luo Shui's heart ached faintly. Even her breathing became cold. However, she had no way out. She had no other choice. 30,000 miles away from the ancient viewing platform. In the shattered sky, Ji Tianqing and the white-haired woman were still fighting fiercely. However, after exchanging 2,000 blows, the outcome of the battle was about to be decided. Ji Tianqing was slightly better. He was only slightly injured. There were a few wounds on his chest and back. Golden divine blood soaked his white robe, and his long hair draped over his shoulders. On the other hand, the white-haired woman's injuries were obviously more serious. Not only was her entire body covered in wounds, but her dress was also stained with blood. There was also a fist-sized bloody hole on her waist. It was caused by the god-slaying flying dagger. The wound was difficult to heal. Moreover, she had been injured a few months ago and had yet to recover. She was also seriously injured by Ji Tianqing. Her strength had been greatly weakened, and her aura had become extremely chaotic. Ji Tianqing saw that she was about to lose, so he no longer delayed and used his ultimate move with all his might. Great rotating sacred sword. Following his low shout, the sky lit up with starlight that blotted out the sun. Tens of thousands of starry swords shot down like meteors, covering a radius of thousands of miles. The white-haired woman was under great pressure. Her expression was solemn, and a wry smile flashed across her eyes. Luo Shui, you told me not to hurt him before. But now it seems that you have underestimated this kid's strength. Chapter 2466. The white-haired woman smiled bitterly to herself. She had already tried her best and could only stall for time until now. Facing the starry swords that blotted out the sky, she could only use her strongest life-saving trump card. See God's shield. The white-haired woman shouted in a low voice. Her palms lit up with an icy blue brilliance, and a round shield the size of a millstone appeared. The shield was like an ice crystal. It was exquisite and translucent, and it flickered with a gorgeous icy blue light. The shield was round, but there were 9 sharp thorns and blades protruding from the edges of the shield. It exuded a terrifying chill. Obviously, this was a divine shield that could be used for both offense and defense. Under the white-haired woman's control, the millstone-sized sea god's shield instantly expanded 100 times and became as big as a mountain. Boom! 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 Thousands of starry swords slammed into the sea god's shield with the power to destroy everything. A series of loud bangs erupted. The loud bangs shook the sky and spread thousands of miles away. The sky was blasted into smithereens, becoming riddled with holes, revealing a vast expanse of pitch-black void. The sea god's shield was also trembling. It flickered with an icy blue brilliance, and cracks appeared on it. Fortunately, the divine shield did not shatter. The white-haired woman tried her best to control the divine shield and blocked all the sword lights. Most of the tens of thousands of starry swords collapsed, bursting into starlight fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. However, those starry fragments condensed into even more light swords and stabbed at the white-haired woman. Instantly, the white-haired woman was trapped in a sky full of sword lights and could not escape. While she was shocked, her expression became more and more serious. She did not counterattack and finally decided to retreat. Bam! 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 As countless sword lights slammed into the sea god's shield, the white-haired woman quickly retreated under the protection of the divine shield. Seeing that she was about to escape, Ji Tianqing quickly chased after her with his sword. Swish! 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 He swung his sword and slashed 7 dazzling golden sword lights at the white-haired woman, but they were all blocked by the sea god's shield. The divine shield was flashing with cold light and trembling non-stop, but it was still intact and sturdy. 10 breaths later, the white-haired woman retreated out of the range of the sword lights. She used her teleportation technique and broke through the sky to escape. Shwa! Her figure flashed and disappeared into the void crack. She passed through several layers of alternate spaces and fled thousands of miles away. Ji Tianqing chased after her, but he lost track of the white-haired woman's aura. He could only stop in front of the spatial rift. This battle that could be called a battle of the pinnacle was finally over. The sword light fragments that filled the sky fell down like heavy snow, and the raging storm gradually subsided. Ji Tianqing secretly adjusted his divine power and calmed himself down. He suddenly thought of Yun Yao and Luo Shui. He frowned and muttered to himself, "This is bad. I chased after the white-haired woman for so long, yet Luo Shui did not follow me, nor did he send me a message. Could it be that the white-haired woman was trying to lure me away? She had accomplices who were currently dealing with Luo Shui and Yao Yao. Could her accomplice be General Dragon Fu?" Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing's heart suddenly burned with worry. He quickly turned around and rushed back. Swish! He used his teleportation divine ability, and his body lit up with white light. His figure flashed and crossed 1,000 miles. Next, he streaked across the sky like a stream of light and rushed back at his fastest speed. In a short 15 minutes, he had flown more than 15,000 miles and returned to the vicinity of the mountain peak where Yun Yao was in seclusion. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing landed on the mountain peak and looked around with his sharp eyes. He also released his divine sense to investigate the situation. Luckily, everything around the mountain peak is normal. There are no signs of fighting. This means that Luo Shui was not attacked by any experts. But I clearly asked Luo Shui to guard this place. How did she disappear? Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he felt a little puzzled. Could it be that Luo Shui was also lured away by someone's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain? If that's the case, then wouldn't Yao Yao be in danger? With this sudden thought, he could not be bothered to look for Luo Shui. He quickly landed at the foot of the mountain and cast a spell to escape underground. Swoosh! He drilled into the soil and flew underground without any obstruction. Soon, he arrived outside the cave. The cave that Luo Shui had dug was sealed by 2 layers of divine arrays. Ji Tianqing used his divine sense to scan and found that the divine arrays were intact and operating normally. This made him feel much more at ease, and his anxious mood also eased. However, after some consideration, he still decided to enter the cave and see Yun Yao's situation with his own eyes. He used his God's eye technique and stared at the 2 layers of ceiling divine arrays, carefully observing them. After a while, he saw some clues and found a way to break it. Ha ha ha. Luo Shui actually still remembers this lesser double moon formation. Back then, I only casually mentioned it once to give her some advice. I didn't expect her to remember it in her heart and integrate it into the yin-yang heaven suppression formation. Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a smile. He muttered a few words and began to break the formation. Swish. 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 He waved his hand and shot out rays of dazzling golden divine light into the ceiling divine arrays, breaking the divine arrays as if they were silk from a cocoon. In a short 15 minutes, he had broken the 2 divine arrays. Swoosh! The divine arrays flashed with 5-colored light, and a door that was more than 10 feet tall appeared. Ji Tianqing stepped through the light door and entered the array. He quickly passed through a dark tunnel and arrived at a spacious cave. This cave had a radius of 1,000 feet, and there were traces of human excavation everywhere. There were more than 10 gemstones embedded in the walls, and the light was a little dim. Ji Tianqing looked around the cave, and his gaze fell on the middle of the cave. There was a high platform made of jade, and it was shining with 5-colored divine light, exuding a vast and mighty divine power. When he saw the situation on the high platform, his body stiffened, and his expression changed. There were 2 women on the high platform. One of them was a woman in a white dress, and she was sitting cross-legged on the high platform. She was Yun Yao. Opposite Yun Yao sat a woman in an icy blue dress. She was Luo Shui. Hundreds of divine lights extended from the high platform and bound Yun Yao like ropes. They released an extremely powerful divine power and firmly suppressed Yun Yao. She couldn't move, and she looked at Luo Shui with a complicated expression. She shook her head and tried to persuade Luo Shui, and tears welled up in her eyes. Luo Shui closed her eyes and turned a deaf ear to her words. Pure white divine light surged from her palms, and she was using some kind of divine power. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, and his brows furrowed tightly. He never would have thought that such a thing would happen in just an hour after he left. He couldn't believe his eyes, and he couldn't help but shout, "Luo Shui! What are you doing?" A cold shout that sounded like muffled thunder broke the silence and reverberated in the cave. Ji Tianqing's tone was a little angry, disappointed, and worried. Yun Yao, whose eyes were filled with tears, was relieved when she heard his voice. She hurriedly shouted, "Tianqing! Quick! Stop her! The Divine Master has gone crazy." You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.